Whoa,
West 135th Street and 7th Avenue, Harlem, New York. May 17th, 1923, a Thursday morning, 9:47 a.m. A man in a gray suit stands on the corner, writing in a notebook. Not a reporter, not a resident. A surveyor from the New York City Department of Health. He's counting. Buildings per block. Residents per building. Businesses per storefront. He writes down everything. The number of churches. The number of pool halls. The number of restaurants. The number of barbershops. He marks which buildings have jazz clubs in their basements. Which apartments host rent parties on weekends. Which storefronts have no signs but always have lines of people waiting outside. His notebook has 23 pages. Each page represents one city block. By the end of the week, he'll have mapped 40 square blocks of Harlem in detail the city has never mapped any white neighborhood. Every building cataloged. Every business categorized. Every gathering space identified. Why? Because by 1923, Harlem has become something the city has never seen before. A black neighborhood with money, with businesses, with density, with organization, with visibility. 10 years earlier, in 1913, there were 50,000 black residents in Harlem. By 1920, 150,000. By 1923, 200,000. The largest concentrated urban black population in American history. And they're not hiding. They're building. Churches, newspapers, social clubs, political organizations, business associations, mutual aid societies. Harlem has more black-owned businesses than any neighborhood in America. More black newspapers. More black churches. More black social organizations. The Amsterdam News, founded 1909, circulation 25,000 by 1923. The New York Age, founded 1887, still publishing, still organizing, still agitating. 12 weekly newspapers serving black Harlem. 24 churches with congregations over 500. 37 social clubs, 41 business associations. Numbers the city is tracking because numbers create concern. Here's what the surveyor is really counting: potential, organization, density, wealth, movement. He's mapping not just buildings, but networks, not just residents, but communities, not just businesses, but economic systems. The notebook will become a file. The file will become a database. The database will become a map, and the map will tell authorities one thing: Harlem is too organized to ignore. In 1910, Harlem was invisible to city government, a white neighborhood in decline. Nobody was counting anything. Nobody cared. But then the Great Migration happened. Between 1915 and 1920, 300,000 black people moved to New York City from the South. Most of them went to Harlem, and suddenly the city started paying attention. Not because of crime. Harlem in 1923 has lower crime rates than most immigrant neighborhoods in Manhattan. The Tenderloin, Hell's Kitchen, the Lower East Side, all more dangerous. Harlem is actually quiet by comparison. Families, workers, churches, routine. But here's what made Harlem different. It was black and prosperous. That combination had never existed in a northern city before. Black poverty was familiar. Black rural life was familiar. Black southern life was contained, controlled, understood. But black urban prosperity, black density, black organization on this scale, that was new. That was concerning. That required observation. The city's first official action was the health survey. Disease mapping, tuberculosis rates, infant mortality, housing conditions, standard procedure for immigrant neighborhoods. But the survey went further. It mapped churches by denomination, political meetings by frequency, newspapers by circulation, social clubs by membership size. Information that had nothing to do with health. Information about organization, about networks, about who was leading what. The report, published in August 1923, is 147 pages long. 80 pages cover health data. The rest? Social organization, political activity, economic systems, Business networks. A map of power. The introduction is revealing. It doesn't mention disease until page 3. Instead, it opens with population density, migration patterns, economic growth. The language is clinical, professional, but the concern is clear. Quote from the report: "The rapid concentration of Negro population in Harlem has created a distinct community with its own internal structures, leadership networks, and independent economic systems. The degree of organization observed exceeds typical patterns of immigrant settlement and represents a unique challenge for municipal oversight and coordination." Translation: Harlem is too organized, too independent, too self-sufficient, and that's a problem because self-sufficient communities are harder to control. They don't need city services as desperately. Don't depend on city jobs as completely. Don't require city intervention as often. Independence creates space. Space creates autonomy. Autonomy creates concern. Within 6 months of the health report, 3 other city departments begin their own surveys. The Department of Buildings, the Department of Finance, the Police Department, each with a different justification. Building safety, tax compliance, crime prevention, but each collecting the same types of information: names, addresses, organizations, networks, money. The police department's survey is the most extensive. 50 officers assigned to Harlem. Not to patrol, to observe and document. They map every business. They note which churches have large congregations, which social clubs have prominent members, which newspapers have growing circulation, which political organizations hold regular meetings. They create files on individuals, ministers, business owners, newspaper editors, anyone with influence, anyone who speaks publicly, anyone who organizes anything. By December 1923, the NYPD has files on 237 Harlem residents. None of them arrested. None of them charged with crimes. Just observed. Just documented. Just watched. The files contain addresses, employment information, known associates, organizational memberships, public statements, political affiliations, everything except evidence of illegal activity, because illegal activity is not why they're being watched. They're being watched because they're visible, because they're organized, because they have influence. One file, marked Subject 127, belongs to James Weldon Johnson. Poet, diplomat, NAA, CP Field Secretary. The file notes he lives at 2311 7th Avenue, that he speaks at the Mother AME Zion Church twice monthly, that he's associated with the Amsterdam News, that he's traveled to 12 cities in 1923 giving speeches about civil rights. Nothing illegal, everything documented. The file is 17 pages long. It will grow to 43 pages by 1930. Another file belongs to A. Philip Randolph, labor organizer, editor of the Messenger magazine. The file notes his address, his known associates, his speaking schedule, his publications circulation, his connections to socialist organizations. Randolph has never been arrested, has never been charged with a crime, but his file is 21 pages long in 1923. It will reach 114 pages by 1935. Why create files on people who haven't committed crimes? Because in 1923, city authorities are operating on a new assumption. That organization itself is a concern. That influence itself requires monitoring. That visibility itself demands observation. Harlem isn't being policed because it's dangerous. It's being documented because it's organized. The economic mapping is equally detailed. The Department of Finance sends assessors to every black-owned business in Harlem. They record revenue, inventory, ownership structures, customer bases, official justification, tax compliance. But the information collected goes far beyond tax needs. The assessors note which businesses employ only black workers, which serve only black customers, which are owned by migrants from specific southern states, which are part of business associations, which advertise in which newspapers. Economic mapping as social mapping. Money as a window into networks. One business gets particular attention. The Victory Mutual Life Insurance Company, founded 1919, owned by black investors, serves black customers exclusively. By 1923, it has 4,500 policyholders and $200,000 in assets. The city has 3 different departments investigating it. Not because it's doing anything illegal, because it represents something concerning: black economic independence, capital accumulation outside white control, an institution that doesn't need white banks, white investors, white approval. The companies file notes every investor, every policyholder over a certain value, every business connection. The file is maintained not by the Department of Finance, but by the police department. Insurance records treated as intelligence, economic activity as potential threat. By the end of 1923, the city has created what it officially calls the Harlem Survey Database. Unofficially, police officers call it the MAP. 347 pages. 12 detailed neighborhood maps. Files on 237 individuals. Records on 143 organizations. Data on 412 businesses. Cross-referenced. Indexed. Updated monthly. The most detailed documentation of any neighborhood in New York City. And Harlem residents have no idea it exists. The surveyors are quiet. The file builders are discreet. The observers blend in. The documentation happens without announcement, without controversy, without resistance, because nobody knows it's happening. That's the point. Observation works best when it's invisible. But information creates possibilities. Once you have names, you can create lists. Once you have addresses, you can establish patterns. Once you have networks, you can identify pressure points. Once you have organizations, you can target leaders. The survey isn't passive, it's preparation. Documentation as prelude. In January 1924, the NYPD creates a new unit, the Harlem Coordination Office. 4 detectives, no patrol duties. Their job is simple: maintain the database, update the files, identify emerging leaders, track organizational growth, map economic development, monitor political activity. All legal, all justified as community outreach and public safety. All surveillance. The detectives attend church services. They read every newspaper. They note who speaks at political meetings. They observe who enters and leaves social clubs. They document who associates with whom. They maintain what they call activity logs on individuals and organizations. Daily observations, weekly summaries, monthly reports, everything written down. Everything filed. Everything preserved. Why would the city dedicate 4 full-time detectives to monitoring a neighborhood with low crime rates? Because by 1924, authorities have decided that organization itself is the concern. That black density creates unpredictability. That economic independence reduces leverage. That political consciousness requires preemptive attention. Harlem isn't a threat yet, but it's visible. And visibility invites observation. James Weldon Johnson understood this. He wrote in 1924, "We have become too visible to be ignored and too organized to be dismissed. The question is no longer whether white America will pay attention to Harlem. The question is, what kind of attention we'll receive." He was right. The attention had already started. The files were already growing. The observation had already become systematic. And nobody in Harlem knew yet what was being built, what was being prepared, what was coming. Visibility invites observation. West 137th Street and Lenox Avenue, June 4th, 1924. 2:30 p.m. 2 men sit in an unmarked car. Detective John Morrison, NYPD, 17 years on the force. Detective William Harper, NYPD, 12 years. They're not investigating a crime. They're observing. Morrison has a notebook open. Harper has binoculars. They're watching the entrance to the Harlem Businessmen's Club, a legitimate organization, 300 members, black entrepreneurs, doctors, lawyers, business owners. They meet every Wednesday afternoon to discuss commerce, property values, business conditions. Morrison writes down every person who enters. Name if he knows it. Physical description if he doesn't. Time of arrival. How long they stay. who they arrive with, who they leave with. He's been doing this every Wednesday for 6 weeks. His notebook has 43 pages of observations. Not one word about criminal activity. Just names. Just patterns. Just documentation. Why? Because in 1924, the NYPD has decided that monitoring organization is as important as investigating crime. The Harlem Coordination Office, created in January, now has a mandate. Document leadership, track networks, identify influence, map power, and they've developed a system to do it. Racial mapping. Here's how it works. Every organization in Harlem gets a file. Every file contains a list of members, officers, and regular attendees. Every person on those lists gets cross-referenced to other organizations they're part of. The result is a network map. Who knows whom? Who works with whom? Who has influence? Who is emerging? Who matters? The NYPD calls this community intelligence. The unofficial name is more accurate. Surveillance, not of criminals, of citizens. Legal surveillance, systematic surveillance, racial surveillance. Because this level of documentation isn't happening in white neighborhoods. Irish social clubs aren't being monitored. Italian business associations aren't being mapped. Jewish mutual aid societies aren't being filed. Only black organizations. Only Harlem. The justification is crime prevention. The reality is social control. Knowing who leads what, who organizes what, who influences what. Information as leverage. Documentation as power. By June 1924, the NYPD has files on 73 Harlem organizations, churches, social clubs, business associations, political groups, fraternal orders, literary societies, mutual aid organizations. Each file contains membership lists, meeting schedules, financial information when available, leadership structures, affiliations with other organizations. Each file is updated monthly, some weekly. The most watched organizations daily. The Mother AME Zion Church gets particular attention, founded 1796, relocated to Harlem in 1914. By 1924, it has 3,400 members, the largest black congregation in New York. But the NYPD file isn't about religion, it's about organization. The church has a credit union, a job placement service, a legal aid committee, a political action group. It functions as more than a church. It functions as an institution, and institutions require monitoring. The file on Mother Zion is 61 pages long in June 1924. It contains a complete membership list, names, addresses, occupations of all 3,400 members. It notes which members are politically active, which hold leadership positions in other organizations, which have criminal records, however minor, which have traveled to other cities for political meetings. It tracks the church's finances, donations, expenditures, property holdings, legal information, public information, but compiled, organized, weaponized. Reverend James Walker, the pastor, has his own dedicated file separate from the church, 23 pages. It notes he was born in Virginia in 1877, arrived in New York in 1912, appointed to Mother Zion in 1919. The file contains transcripts of 7 of his sermons, not just notes, full transcripts. Detectives attended services specifically to document what he said. The sermons are political. They discuss voting rights, economic justice, equal treatment under law, nothing illegal, everything documented. One sermon, delivered April 13, 1924, is flagged in the file. Walker told his congregation, "We must organize ourselves. We must build our own institutions. We must stop waiting for white approval and start creating our own power." The detective who transcribed it added a note. Subject advocates, racial independence, and self-organization. Potential for anti-government sentiment. Recommend continued observation. Anti-government sentiment. For saying black people should organize themselves and build their own institutions. That's the standard. That's the threshold. Self-sufficiency equals suspicion. Organization equals concern. Independence equals threat. The Harlem Business Men's Club file is 43 pages. It lists all 300 members, their businesses, their addresses, their political affiliations. It notes the club has donated $2,000 to NAACP legal defense funds. That club members have traveled to Washington, D.C. twice to meet with federal officials about discrimination in government contracts. That the club publishes a monthly bulletin about economic conditions in Harlem. All legal, all documented, all filed as activities of concern. The Negro World newspaper gets its own classification system. Founded 1918 by Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association. By 1924, it has a circulation of 50,000. The NYPD maintains a complete collection of every issue. Detectives read every article. They note which writers use what language, which editorials advocate for what policies, which advertisements connect to which businesses. They create individual files on every regular contributor. 11 writers, 11 files. None with criminal records, all with pages of documentation. This level of scrutiny requires resources. The Harlem Coordination Office expands from 4 detectives to 9 by July 1924. Their budget increases from $6,000 annually to $15,000. That's more than the department spends on gang units in Hell's Kitchen, more than it spends on organized crime monitoring in Little Italy, more resources dedicated to watching law-abiding citizens in Harlem than to investigating actual criminals in other neighborhoods. The detectives develop systems, observation protocols, classification methods, intelligence gathering techniques. They attend every public meeting. They subscribe to every newspaper. They join organizations under false pretenses when possible. They cultivate informants when necessary. And they write everything down. The files grow exponentially. 100 pages per month added to the database. 1,200 pages per year. All archived. All indexed. All permanent. July 18th, 1924. The NYPD creates a new classification system for Harlem residents. 4 categories: compliant, observable, concerning, threatening. The definitions are revealing. Compliant means minimal organizational involvement. Observable means membership in organizations, but no leadership role. Concerning means leadership in organizations or regular public speaking. Threatening means advocacy for significant social change or criticism of government. Marcus Garvey is classified as threatening. His file is 243 pages long. A. Philip Randolph, classified as threatening. His file is 114 pages. James Weldon Johnson, classified as concerning. His file is 43 pages. Reverend James Walker, classified as concerning. His file is 23 pages. 1,473 Harlem residents are classified as observable. 6,237 are classified as compliant. Who decided these classifications? What criteria determined who was threatening versus concerning? The files don't say. The decision-making process is internal, subjective, unaccountable. But the classifications have consequences. Threatening individuals get daily observation. Concerning individuals get weekly check-ins. Observable individuals get monthly documentation. Compliant individuals get minimal attention unless their status changes. Status can change quickly. Attend too many meetings. Move from observable to concerning. Give a public speech. Move from concerning to threatening. Join the wrong organization. Get reclassified. The system creates pressure without prosecution. Visibility creates risk. Activity creates scrutiny. Organization creates documentation. And documentation creates leverage. August 1924. The NYPD begins coordinating with other agencies. The Department of Buildings starts inspecting properties owned by people classified as concerning or threatening. Building code violations suddenly get noticed. Safety concerns suddenly get raised. Legal pressure through regulatory enforcement. The Department of Health inspects restaurants owned by observable individuals. Sanitation standards suddenly get strictly applied. The Department of Finance audits businesses connected to political organizations. Tax compliance suddenly gets questioned. Nothing illegal, Everything coordinated. The organizations don't realize different departments are working together. They think it's random enforcement, bad luck, coincidence, but it's systematic. The police identify targets. Other departments apply pressure, legal pressure, financial pressure, regulatory pressure. Never enough to provoke resistance. Just enough to create difficulty, to increase cost, to reduce capacity. One example, the Harlem Tenants League, founded 1923, organizes rent strikes against landlords who refuse to make repairs. By August 1924, it has 400 members. Completely legal. Successful. In September 1924, the Department of Buildings inspects every property where League officers live. 8 buildings. 23 violations cited. Repair costs total $40,000. 3 properties face closure orders. The Tenants League has to divert resources from organizing to helping officers find new housing. Coincidence? The timing suggests otherwise. Another example, the Colored Merchants Association, founded 1919, encourages Harlem residents to shop at black-owned stores, promotes economic self-sufficiency, legal, successful. In October 1924, the Department of Finance audits 47 black-owned businesses. All members of the association. 17 are assessed additional taxes. 9 face penalty fees. 12 get warnings about license violations. The association has to provide legal assistance to members instead of focusing on expansion. Coincidence? The pattern suggests coordination. The files document this coordination. Internal memos reference multi-department approach and regulatory coordination. One memo from October 1924 states explicitly, traditional policing methods are inadequate for addressing organizational concerns in Harlem. A broader approach utilizing multiple city agencies allows for pressure without the legal and political complications of direct enforcement. Translation: we can't arrest people for organizing legally, but we can make their lives difficult through inspections, audits, regulations, and bureaucratic obstacles. We can slow them down without shutting them down. We can create costs without creating martyrs. We can apply pressure without provoking resistance. Policing without police. Control without confrontation. Surveillance as administration. This is the innovation. This is what makes Harlem different, not overt repression. Systemic management, not violent suppression. Bureaucratic containment, watching, documenting, filing, pressuring, managing, controlling. All legal, all coordinated, all effective. By December 1924, the system is fully operational. 9 detectives in the Harlem Coordination Office, 4 other city agencies coordinating with them, 2,147 individual files, 73 organizational files, classification system in place, observation protocols established, multi-department coordination functioning, the infrastructure of surveillance complete. And Harlem is starting to notice, not the details, not the files, not the coordination, but the pressure. Business owners are facing more inspections. Organizers are encountering more obstacles. Leaders are experiencing more scrutiny. Something has changed. Something is happening. But what? And how? And who's coordinating it? Those questions won't be answered for years, because the surveillance is designed to be invisible. The coordination is designed to be deniable. The system is designed to function without acknowledgement, watching without being seen, documenting without being discovered, controlling without being identified. That's the purpose. That's the design. That's the innovation. A. Philip Randolph wrote in The Messenger in December 1924, "We are beginning to experience pressure we cannot fully explain. Obstacles that seem too coordinated to be coincidence. Difficulties that target our most effective organizations. Someone is watching. Someone is responding. Someone has decided we require management." He was right, but he didn't know the scale, didn't know the depth, didn't know the system. The files would remain secret for decades. The coordination would remain hidden. The surveillance would remain invisible. Information, once collected, becomes permanent. Names, once written, become targets. Organizations, once mapped, become vulnerable. Information creates leverage. Room 317, Police Headquarters, 240 Center Street, Manhattan. January 12th, 1925. 10:15 a.m. A filing cabinet, 6 feet tall, gray metal, 4 drawers, each drawer packed with folders, each folder containing pages, each page containing names. This cabinet holds every file the NYPD has created on Harlem residents and organizations. 2,394 individual files, 81 organizational files, growing daily, and next to it, a second cabinet, empty drawers, waiting to be filled. Detective Thomas McKenna opens the top drawer. He pulls out a folder marked Watch List, Priority Level 1. Inside, 43 names, not criminals, not suspects. People the NYPD has decided require constant observation. Marcus Garvey, A. Philip Randolph, Hubert Harrison, Cyril Briggs, Grace Campbell, James Weldon Johnson. Every person on this list is politically active. Every person is a leader. Every person is, as far as the law is concerned, completely innocent. But innocence is not the criterion. Influence is. The watch list doesn't track crimes. It tracks potential. Who might organize what? Who might influence whom? Who might say what? The list is predictive, preventive, preemptive. It identifies people before they do anything the police want to prevent. Watch lists have always existed. Police have always tracked dangerous individuals. But this is different. These aren't dangerous people. These are organized people. The danger isn't what they've done. It's what they might convince others to do. Speak, organize, agitate, resist. That's the threat. That's what the watch list is designed to contain. McKenna is the keeper of the files. His official title is Intelligence Coordinator. His actual job is simpler. Decide who gets watched, how closely, why. He's been doing this for 14 months. He's good at it. He understands something fundamental. That control begins with information. That power begins with lists. That once you write someone's name down, you can do things to them that were impossible when they were anonymous. The watch list has 4 priority levels. Level 1, 43 people, requires daily observation. Level 2, 117 people, requires weekly check-ins. Level 3, 462 people, requires monthly documentation. Level 4, 1,391 people, requires observation only if they become more active. The levels shift. Someone gives a speech. They move up. Someone stops attending meetings. They move down. The list is fluid, responsive, always updated. Who decides the levels? McKenna and 8 other detectives. No written criteria. No formal review process. No appeals. They meet every Monday morning. They discuss who's been active, who's been quiet, who's been saying what. They make decisions. They update files. They reassign observation duties, and the people being watched have no idea. No notification, no transparency, no due process, because there's no crime, no charge, no arrest. Just observation, just documentation, just lists. February 1925. The NYPD expands the watch list system. They create subcategories: agitators, organizers, undesirables. Each category has its own criteria. Agitators are people who speak publicly about racial injustice. Organizers are people who build institutions or coordinate collective action. Undesirables are people who the police believe encourage disrespect for authority. The definitions are vague, intentionally, because vague definitions allow maximum discretion. Anyone can be classified as anything if the definition is flexible enough. Marcus Garvey is classified as all 3: agitator, organizer, undesirable. His file has a red flag on it. That means any police officer who encounters him must file a report within 24 hours. Location, time, people he was with, what was discussed if known, even routine encounters, even chance meetings. everything documented. Grace Campbell is classified as an agitator and organizer. She's a social worker. She runs educational programs for black women. She organizes voter registration drives. She's never been arrested, never been charged with anything. But her file is 71 pages long because she speaks publicly, because she organizes people, because she has influence. Hubert Harrison is classified as an agitator and an undesirable. He's a writer, an orator, a public intellectual. He delivers street corner lectures about philosophy, politics, and history. Hundreds of people attend. He's brilliant. He's persuasive. And according to his file, he's dangerous because he encourages disrespect for existing social structures and promotes ideas that undermine racial hierarchy. Translation: he tells black people they deserve equality. That's the danger. That's why he's on the watch list. The files contain remarkable detail, not just names and addresses, not just organizational memberships, but patterns, routines, associations, habits. One file notes that a subject stops at a particular newsstand every Thursday morning. Another notes that a subject attends church services on the second and fourth Sunday of every month, but not the first and third. Another notes that a subject prefers a particular barbershop and a particular bar. Details that seem trivial, but become significant when combined. When you know someone's patterns, you can predict their movements. When you can predict movements, you can intercept. Influence. Control. March 1925. The watch list expands again. The NYPD starts adding people who aren't leaders, who aren't organizers, who aren't publicly active, people who associate with people on the watch list, friends of agitators, employees of organizers, family members of undesirables, guilt by association, surveillance by proximity. If you know someone who's being watched, you're being watched too. Not as closely, not as intensively, but watched. This creates a multiplier effect. 43 Priority Level 1 targets become 400 people being observed because those 43 people know, work with, or are related to others. The surveillance spreads through social networks like a disease. Everyone who touches someone on the list gets touched by the list. The system expands geometrically. One example, Reverend Walter Harris, small church, 50 members. He's not on any watch list, but his brother is, William Harris, a labor organizer. Priority Level 2. So Walter gets a file. Not because of anything he's done, because of who he's related to. The file notes that William sometimes stays at Walter's house, that they eat dinner together weekly, that members of William's union sometimes attend Walter's church. Walter Harris is being watched because his brother is being watched. That's the logic. That's the system. April 1925. McKenna writes a memo to his superiors. He proposes creating a master index, a cross-referenced system that links every file to every other relevant file, so that when one person appears in multiple contexts, all those appearances are connected. If someone is mentioned in 5 different files, those 5 files should reference each other. The proposal is approved. 2 clerks are assigned to the project full-time. The work takes 6 months. By October 1925, the index is complete. 2,718 files. Cross-referenced, interconnected, searchable. Now the system can answer questions it couldn't answer before. How many people on the watch list are also members of the NAACP? 47. How many people associated with Marcus Garvey also attend Mother AME Zion Church? 23. How many people who write for the Negro World also work in specific industries? Detailed breakdowns, statistical analysis, network mapping, information that reveals patterns, vulnerabilities, pressure points. The master index makes the surveillance more efficient, more targeted, more powerful. Before the index, watching someone meant reading their individual file. After the index, watching someone means understanding their entire network, every connection, every association, every relationship. 3-dimensional surveillance, systemic surveillance, network surveillance, May 1925. The NYPD starts using the index to identify targets for intervention. Not arrest. Intervention. They select people who connect multiple networks, who bridge different organizations, who facilitate cooperation between groups. Then they apply pressure. Not enough to provoke, just enough to disrupt. A tax audit, a building inspection, a license review. Legal pressure that creates problems, that consumes time, that reduces effectiveness. One target is Herman Foster. He's not a leader. He's a coordinator. He works as a clerk for the Colored Merchants Association. He also volunteers with the Harlem Tenants League. He also helps organize meetings for A. Philip Randolph's union. He's a connector. He makes different groups work together. In June 1925, he's audited by the Department of Finance. No major violations found. But the audit takes 3 months. 3 months Foster can't coordinate, can't connect, can't facilitate. The investigation finds nothing, but it accomplishes everything. Another target is Sarah Collins. She owns a small restaurant, meeting place for 3 different organizations. Business owners gather there. Union members gather there. Church groups gather there. Her restaurant is a node, a nexus, a place where networks intersect. In July 1925, the Department of Health inspects her restaurant. Citations for minor violations. She has to close for 2 weeks for repairs. When she reopens, one of the organizations has found a different meeting place. The network is disrupted. The connection is broken. Legal action. Devastating effect. The files document this strategy explicitly. One memo from August 1925 states, "Traditional surveillance focuses on individuals, but influence in Harlem operates through networks. The most effective intervention targets, not the most prominent individuals, but the most connected ones. Remove connectors and networks fragment." This is sophisticated. This is not standard police work. This is systems thinking. Network theory. Social engineering. The NYPD is developing methods that won't be formally theorized in academic sociology for another 30 years. But they're implementing them in 1925. Watching networks, mapping connections, targeting structure. September 1925. The watch list has grown to 3,294 people. The organizational files cover 117 groups. The master index contains 400,000 cross-references. The file cabinets now occupy an entire room. 4 detectives work full-time just maintaining the database. The Harlem Coordination Office has 16 personnel. The budget is $28,000 annually. More resources dedicated to watching law-abiding citizens than to investigating actual organized crime in Manhattan. And nobody in Harlem knows the full scope. They know they're being watched. They see the detectives. They notice the pattern of inspections and audits. But they don't know about the files. Don't know about the lists. Don't know about the classification system. Don't know about the cross-referencing. Don't know about the coordination. They think it's local. They think it's reactive. They think it's manageable. They're wrong. The surveillance is systematic. The documentation is permanent. The system is designed to function across time. The files aren't built just to track current activity. They're built to track future activity, to identify the next generation of leaders before they become leaders, to watch children of agitators, to document young people who attend political meetings, to mark students who show interest in social change. The files are generational. The surveillance is indefinite. The lists are forever. December 1925. McKenna adds a new section to every Priority Level 1 file. Known associates of children. If Marcus Garvey has a son, the file notes which schools he attends, which teachers he has, which children he plays with. If A. Philip Randolph has a nephew, the file notes where he lives, where he works, who he dates. Surveillance extending through family lines, through generations, through time. The logic is clear. Today's agitator was yesterday's student. Tomorrow's organizer is today's young person. Watch them now. Document them early. File them permanently. This is what happens when surveillance becomes systematic. when documentation becomes comprehensive, when lists become permanent, the scope expands, the reach extends, the intrusiveness intensifies. Because once you start watching, there's no logical stopping point. Every connection suggests another connection. Every associate suggests another associate. Every organization suggests another organization. The files grow, the lists expand, the surveillance deepens, and nobody stops it because nobody's watching the watchers. No oversight, no review, no accountability. The police decide who to watch. They decide how to classify. They decide what information matters. They decide what connections mean. They decide what requires intervention. All internal, all discretionary, all invisible to the people being watched. A. Philip Randolph understood this by the end of 1925. He wrote, "We are being systematically documented. Our names are being written down. Our associations are being recorded. Our activities are being filed, and we have no way to know what's in those files. No way to correct errors. No way to challenge classifications. No way to contest decisions made about us in rooms we'll never enter by people we'll never meet. This is not policing. This is something else. Something worse. Because crime can be defended against. Documentation can't be." He was right. The files were growing. The lists were expanding. The system was functioning. And Harlem was being mapped, classified, filed, and watched with an intensity no community in America had ever experienced. All legal, all justified as public safety, all designed not to prosecute crimes, but to manage populations, to control organizing, to limit collective action, to prevent problems before they occurred by watching people before they acted. The filing cabinets in room 317 contained something more dangerous than evidence. They contained potential. The potential to know everything about anyone. The potential to pressure anyone at any time. The potential to disrupt any organization. The potential to fragment any network. The potential to control a community without ever announcing you were doing it. That's what the lists created. That's what the files enabled. That's what the watchmen were building. A system, an infrastructure, a mechanism of control disguised as information management. Once names were written down, plans followed. Abyssinian Baptist Church, 132 West 138th Street, Harlem. Sunday morning, March 8th, 1926. 11 a.m. 3,000 people packed into pews. Standing room only. Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Sr. is preaching. His voice fills the sanctuary. The choir is singing. The congregation is responding. And in the fifth row, center aisle, a man named Robert Johnson is taking notes. Not sermon notes. Observation notes. Names. Who sits with whom? Who speaks to whom after the service? Who attends the political meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. in the basement? Robert Johnson joined Abyssinian 6 months ago, September 1925. He attended services faithfully. He volunteered for committees. He donated money. He became trusted, familiar, welcome. Nobody suspects. Nobody questions. Nobody knows that Robert Johnson is being paid $75 per month by the NYPD to attend this church and document everything that happens inside it. He's not the only one. The NYPD has informants in 17 Harlem churches by March 1926. Some paid, some coerced, all reporting. They attend services. They join committees. They participate in activities. And they write reports. Who's speaking? What's being said? Who's organizing what? Who's attending which meetings? Everything documented. Everything filed. Everything used. How do you recruit an informant? Sometimes with money. Johnson, for instance. He needed work. The Depression is still 3 years away, but Harlem's economy is already precarious. Jobs are scarce. Rent is high. Johnson has a family, 3 children. When Detective McKenna approached him in August 1925 and offered $75 per month to attend church and take notes, Johnson agreed. Not out of malice, out of necessity. He justified it. Just attending services. Just writing down names. Not hurting anyone. Just surviving. But sometimes recruitment is different. Sometimes it's coercion. Sometimes it's leverage. criminal charges that can be dropped, immigration papers that can be approved, licenses that can be issued, problems that can disappear if you cooperate, if you inform, if you help. Take Edward Morris. He runs a small grocery store. He's also a member of the Colored Merchants Association. In February 1926, the Department of Health finds violations in his store. Not serious, but enough to threaten closure. Detective Harper visits. He offers a deal. The violations can be overlooked. The store can stay open. All Morris has to do is attend Merchants Association meetings and report what's discussed. Who said what? Who's planning what? Simple. Easy. Necessary. Morris agrees. The violations disappear. The reports begin. This is how infiltration works. Not dramatic, not violent, just pressure and offers. Just problems and solutions. Just survival and cooperation. And once someone starts reporting, they can't stop. Because if they stop, the problems return. The leverage remains. The relationship becomes permanent. Informants aren't recruited once. They're maintained indefinitely. By April 1926, the NYPD has informants in 43 Harlem organizations. Churches, social clubs, business associations, unions, political groups, literary societies, fraternal orders. Some informants are paid. 15 receive monthly salaries ranging from $50 to $100. Some are coerced. 28 face various forms of pressure if they stop cooperating. All are secret. None are acknowledged. None are disclosed. The infiltration is systematic, comprehensive, invisible. The reports are detailed, not just who attended meetings, but what was said, what was decided, what was planned. Internal debates documented, private conversations recorded, strategic discussions revealed. Organizations have no secrets because informants are everywhere. In leadership, in membership, in administration, watching, listening, reporting. May 15th, 1926. The Harlem Tenants League holds a strategy meeting. 14 leaders attend. They discuss plans for a rent strike at 5 buildings on West 142nd Street. They debate tactics. They assign responsibilities. They schedule coordination meetings. It's a closed meeting, members only, confidential, strategic. 3 days later, Detective McKenna has a complete report on the meeting. Who attended? What was discussed? What was decided? When the strike will begin? Which buildings will be targeted? Who will lead? He has this information because one of the 14 people at that meeting is reporting to him. The League doesn't know which one. They trust all 14. They're wrong to trust. McKenna forwards the information to the Department of Buildings. Building inspectors visit all 5 properties the next week. They cite numerous violations. They post closure notices. The landlords, suddenly pressured by the city, agree to make repairs before the strike begins. The strike becomes unnecessary. The organizing effort produces nothing. The League wasted 3 months planning an action that was undermined before it started. They don't know why. They don't know how. They don't know their planning meeting was documented by someone sitting at the table. This is the power of infiltration. Not just information, preemption, action based on advanced knowledge, disruption without confrontation. Organizations can't succeed if their strategies are known before they execute them. Can't organize effectively if their plans are revealed before they implement them. Can't maintain momentum if every initiative is countered before it begins. June 1926. The Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, led by A. Philip Randolph, is organizing for union recognition. They're planning a major membership drive. They're going to canvass every porter in New York. They're going to hold rallies, distribute literature, sign up workers. It's their most ambitious organizing effort yet. They've been planning for 6 months. They've been careful, strategic, coordinated. The campaign launches on June 14th. Within 3 days, the Pullman Company knows everything. The canvassing schedule, the rally locations, the names of key organizers, the talking points. They know because Detective McKenna provided the information. He got it from an informant who's been attending Brotherhood meetings for 4 months. The informant is a porter. He's trusted. He's committed. He's reporting. The Pullman Company responds immediately. They transfer the key organizers to different routes. They change work schedules to conflict with rallies. They distribute counter-literature the day before the Brotherhood distributes theirs. They're always one step ahead because they know what's coming. The membership drive fails. Not because of bad strategy, because the strategy was known, because infiltration defeated organization. July 1926. Informants are reporting on private conversations, not just meetings, personal discussions, informal gatherings, social events. One report, filed July 18th, describes a dinner party at someone's home. 8 people attended. The informant was one of them. He reported what everyone said: political opinions, strategic thoughts, personal concerns, private conversations documented and filed. Nothing is private. Nothing is safe. Nothing is confidential when informants are present. The psychological impact is devastating. Organizations start suspecting each other. Who's reporting? Who's informing? Who's the infiltrator? Trust erodes. Suspicion grows. Coordination becomes difficult because nobody knows who can be trusted. Meetings become guarded. Conversations become careful. Strategy becomes impossible because strategic discussion requires trust, and trust is disappearing. August 1926. The NYPD develops a new tactic: counter-organizing. Not just observing organizations, not just infiltrating them, actually shaping them. Informants don't just report. They participate. They make suggestions. They influence decisions. They steer discussions. They guide strategy. Subtly, carefully, incrementally. Organizations think they're making their own decisions, but their decisions are being influenced by people who are reporting to police. One example: the Harlem Business Men's Club is debating whether to publicly support A. Philip Randolph's union campaign. It's a significant decision. Public support would legitimize the union, would encourage other businesses to support organizing, would create economic pressure on employers. The debate is intense, divided. Edward Morris, the grocery store owner, the informant, argues against support. Not obviously, not aggressively. He raises concerns, practical concerns, economic concerns. He suggests the club should stay neutral, should focus on business issues, should avoid political controversy. His arguments are reasonable, persuasive. Several members agree. The vote is close. The club decides against public support. The decision is influenced by an informant. The organization's direction is shaped by infiltration. This is sophisticated. This is beyond surveillance. This is manipulation. Organizations aren't just being watched. They're being guided, controlled, managed from inside, by people they trust, by members they welcome, by participants they rely on. The infiltration is complete. The control is invisible. The manipulation is undetectable. September 1926. Detection becomes impossible because informants are everywhere. In leadership, in membership, in administration. Organizations can't identify who's reporting because everyone might be reporting. Can't remove infiltrators because they don't know who they are. Can't trust anyone because trust itself has become a liability. Paranoia becomes rational. Suspicion becomes necessary. Isolation becomes protective. Some organizations respond by limiting information, compartmentalizing knowledge, restricting meeting attendance, controlling communication. These measures reduce effectiveness. Coordination requires communication. Strategy requires shared knowledge. Organization requires openness. When organizations close down to protect themselves from infiltration, they limit their own capacity. The infiltration succeeds even when it's not present because the fear of infiltration is as destructive as infiltration itself. October 1926. The NYPD files contain reports from 67 active informants, each submitting weekly reports, some submitting daily. The volume of information is overwhelming. 2 detectives are assigned full-time just to process informant reports, reading them, filing them, cross-referencing them, distributing them to relevant departments. The infiltration has generated so much information that managing the information becomes a job itself. But the information is valuable. It enables preemption. It prevents coordination. It disrupts organizing. It creates fear. It destroys trust. All without arrests, without prosecutions, without public confrontations. Organizations are being destroyed from inside. Leaders are being isolated. Movements are being fragmented, and it's invisible, silent, deniable. November 15th, 1926. Reverend Adam Clayton Powell. Senior delivers a sermon. He doesn't mention infiltration directly, but he addresses it obliquely. He tells his congregation, "We are being tested, not by our enemies, who we can see, but by invisible forces, by doubts planted in our minds, by suspicions that divide us, by fears that isolate us. They want us to stop trusting each other, to stop working together, to stop organizing. And if we let fear control us, they win without fighting us." He's right, but he doesn't know the scope, doesn't know there's an informant in his church, doesn't know his words are being transcribed and filed, doesn't know that within 3 days, Detective McKenna will have a report on his sermon, doesn't know that his warnings about infiltration are being documented by the infiltration he's warning against. The irony is complete. The infiltration is total. December 1926. Organizations are struggling, not because they're being attacked openly, because they're being undermined quietly. Their plans are known before they execute them. Their strategies are countered before they implement them. Their coordination is disrupted before they organize, and they don't know why, don't know how, don't know who. They suspect infiltration. They fear informants, but they can't prove anything, can't identify anyone, can't protect themselves. The NYPD has achieved something remarkable: control without confrontation, disruption without visibility, victory without battle. They've made organization nearly impossible, not by banning it, by infiltrating it, not by arresting organizers, by reporting on them, not by suppressing movements, by fragmenting them from inside. The method is effective. The impact is devastating. The damage is permanent. January 1927. Philip Randolph writes in The Messenger, "Something is wrong. Our efforts are failing in ways we cannot explain. Our plans are countered before we execute them. Our strategies are known before we announce them. Our coordination is disrupted before we organize. We suspect treachery. But suspicion without evidence creates paranoia, and paranoia destroys what treachery begins. We are being defeated by methods we cannot see, by forces we cannot identify, by betrayals we cannot prove. And the not knowing is worse than the knowing, because we cannot defend against what we cannot identify." He's describing infiltration without naming it, because naming it requires proof, and proof doesn't exist. The informants are secret. The reports are confidential. The infiltration is deniable. Organizations know they're being undermined, but they can't prove it, can't document it, can't expose it. They're fighting invisible enemies, and you can't win against enemies you can't see. By January 1927, the infiltration infrastructure is complete. 67 active informants, 43 organizations penetrated, weekly reports, daily updates when necessary, complete documentation, full preemption, total control. And the cost: destroyed trust, fragmented organizations, failed initiatives, isolated leaders, demoralized members, communities that stop organizing because organizing has become impossible. Not because it's banned, because it's infiltrated. Because every effort is known. Because every plan is countered. Because success has become impossible when the enemy knows everything before you do anything. The files document the success. McKenna writes in his annual report, January 1927, "Infiltration has proven more effective than prosecution. Organizations that cannot be legally suppressed can be operationally destroyed through strategic intelligence gathering and preemptive intervention. The cost of maintaining informant networks is minimal compared to the results achieved. Harlem's organizational capacity has been significantly reduced without generating public controversy or legal challenges. The method is effective, efficient, and sustainable. Translation: we've destroyed their ability to organize. We've done it quietly. We've done it legally. We've done it cheaply. And we can keep doing it indefinitely. Nobody knows. Nobody's resisting. Nobody can prove anything. The infiltration works. The control succeeds. The victory is complete. But the human cost is invisible in the files. The grocery store owner who betrays his business association to keep his store open. The church member who reports on his congregation to pay his rent. The union member who undermines his brothers to avoid prosecution. The social worker who documents her clients to protect her job. People forced to choose between survival and loyalty, between necessity and integrity, between feeding their families and maintaining their principles. The files don't record their guilt, their shame, their damage, only their reports, only their information, only their usefulness. Trust became the first casualty. 145th Street and 7th Avenue, Harlem, October 3rd, 1927. 8:30 p.m. A storefront. Windows covered with newspaper. No sign. No business license visible. Just a door. And outside that door, a line of people. 30, 40 people. Waiting. They're not waiting for food. They're not waiting for work. They're waiting to place bets. This is a policy bank. A numbers game. Illegal gambling. And the NYPD is watching. Not to arrest anyone. To document. To track. To follow the money. Detective William Harper sits in a car across the street. He has binoculars. He has a camera with a telephoto lens. He has a notebook. For the past 3 weeks, he's been watching this location every evening, photographing everyone who enters, noting arrival times, estimating how long they stay inside, tracking patterns, building a database of customers, not for prosecution, for leverage. The policy game is simple. You bet on a 3-digit number, anywhere from 000 to 999. The winning number is determined daily by something public and hard to manipulate. Sometimes it's the last 3 digits of the total handle at a racetrack. Sometimes it's based on stock exchange figures. Sometimes it's lottery drawings. The odds of winning are 1 in 1,000, but the payout is 600 to 1. Bet $1, win 600. The house keeps the rest. The profit margin is massive. The operation Harper is watching is run by a man named Richard Butler. He operates 11 policy banks across Harlem. By October 1927, he's collecting approximately $8,000 per day in bets. That's $240,000 per month. Nearly $3 million per year. In today's money, roughly $50 million annually. All cash, all untaxed, all illegal. And the NYPD isn't stopping it. They're mapping it. Why? Because economic surveillance is more valuable than prosecution. If you arrest Butler, he gets replaced. Someone else runs the operation. The money keeps flowing. But if you map the operation, document the network, track the finances, you create options. You can pressure. You can disrupt. You can extract. You can control. Prosecution ends one operator. Surveillance creates ongoing leverage over the entire system. Harper's surveillance is comprehensive. He tracks not just customers, but patterns. How much money is moving, when it's moving, where it's going. The policy bank operates every day, but certain days are busier. Friday and Saturday, payday, when people have money, when betting increases. Harper documents the weekly rhythm, the financial pulse of the operation, not to stop it, to understand it, to control it. November 1927. The NYPD creates a special unit, the Economic Intelligence Division. 5 detectives. Their mission isn't fighting crime. It's mapping money, where it comes from, where it goes, who controls it, how it moves. They focus primarily on Harlem, on black-owned businesses, on informal economies, on cash flows that don't go through white institutions, on money that exists outside white control. The division's first major project is mapping the entire policy game infrastructure in Harlem. They identify 43 separate operations. They calculate total daily betting volume, approximately $80,000 per day across all operations. That's $2.4 million per month, $29 million per year. In a neighborhood where the median family income is $1,400 per year, the policy game is extracting $29 million. The numbers are staggering. The opportunity for control is obvious. The detectives document everything: who runs each operation, where the banks are located, who the runners are, who collects money, who pays winners, who handles cash transfers, who provides protection. The entire network, mapped, documented, understood, and then they share this information, not with prosecutors, with other city agencies. December 1927. The Department of Finance receives detailed information about policy game operators: names, addresses, businesses they own, properties they control, assets they hold. The department doesn't immediately raid anyone. They audit, carefully, selectively, strategically. Richard Butler owns a barbershop, a restaurant, 2 apartment buildings, all legitimate businesses, all purchased with policy game profits, all vulnerable to scrutiny. In January 1928, Butler's businesses are audited. The restaurant owes $3,400 in back taxes. The apartment buildings have unpaid property taxes totaling $7,200. The barbershop has license irregularities. The problems are real, but they're being enforced selectively. Other businesses in Harlem have similar problems, but Butler is targeted specifically because the NYPD identified him through economic surveillance. The audit is coordinated. The pressure is strategic. The timing is not coincidental. Butler has options: pay the taxes and penalties, or lose the businesses. He pays $10,600 total. Where does the money come from? The policy game. But here's what's changed. The city has extracted money from an illegal operation without prosecuting it, without shutting it down, without generating controversy. They've found a way to tax illegal activity indirectly, to monetize surveillance, to profit from observation without taking the political risk of enforcement. This model spreads quickly. February 1928. The Economic Intelligence Division identifies 15 more policy operators with legitimate businesses. All get audited. All face penalties. All pay. The city collects $84,000 in back taxes and penalties in 3 months. Not from prosecuting illegal gambling, from strategic economic pressure based on surveillance. The policy game continues. The operators continue. The money continues. But now the city gets a cut. Through taxes, through penalties, through regulatory enforcement, legal extraction from illegal activity. March 1928. The surveillance expands beyond policy games. The division starts mapping all cash-based businesses in Harlem. Restaurants, barbershops, beauty salons, grocery stores, butcher shops, tailors. Any business that primarily deals in cash. Any business where income is hard to verify. Any business that might be underreporting earnings. The detectives don't need proof of tax evasion. They just need patterns that suggest it. Then they refer businesses for audit, selective enforcement, strategic pressure, systematic extraction. One target is the Harlem Merchants Cooperative, 12 black-owned grocery stores pooling purchasing power to negotiate better wholesale prices. Legal, effective, successful. They're reducing costs, increasing profits, building economic power. And they're getting attention from the Economic Intelligence Division. Not because they're breaking laws, because they're succeeding, because black economic cooperation represents something concerning: independence, self-sufficiency, power outside white control. April 1928. All 12 stores in the cooperative are audited within 1 week. Not random, coordinated. 10 of the 12 are assessed additional taxes. 8 face penalty fees. The cooperative has to provide legal assistance to members, has to help members gather documentation, has to divert resources from expansion to compliance. the coordination reduces, the momentum stops, the success is interrupted. Legal pressure achieving what illegal action could not. Disruption through regulation. Control through taxation. The surveillance reveals something important about Harlem's economy. There are two economies operating simultaneously: the visible economy, businesses with licenses, transactions with receipts, income that's reported, and the invisible economy, cash transactions, informal arrangements, income that's never documented. The policy game is part of the invisible economy. But so are rent parties, street vendors, unlicensed services, cash labor, informal credit networks, an entire economic system operating below official visibility. The invisible economy is larger than the visible economy. Millions of dollars moving through Harlem that never appear in tax records, never get reported to authorities, never enter the official financial system. This represents independence. Black people transacting with black people. Money circulating within the community. Wealth being built without white institutional involvement. And it's being mapped, documented, targeted for control. May 1928. The Economic Intelligence Division begins tracking informal credit networks. Harlem has rotating credit associations, groups of people contributing money to a common pool. Each month, one member takes the entire pool. It rotates until everyone has received. It's a traditional system, brought from the Caribbean, from West Africa. It operates on trust, on social networks, on cultural practices. No banks involved. No white institutions involved. No official oversight. The police want to document these networks, not because they're illegal, they're not, but because they represent financial organization outside official control. The division identifies 37 rotating credit associations in Harlem. They estimate total capital in circulation is approximately $180,000. That's money not in banks, not generating interest for white institutions, not accessible to white capital. It's black money serving black needs. And that's concerning to authorities who believe all economic activity should be visible, regulated, and accessible. June 1928. The city begins using licensing as economic control. Businesses need licenses. Vendors need permits. Services need certifications. And the process of getting these approvals has become more complex, more expensive, more difficult. Applications that used to take 2 weeks now take 2 months. Fees that used to cost $10 now cost $25. Requirements that used to be simple now demand extensive documentation. This isn't random bureaucracy, it's strategic bottlenecking, making legal economic activity more difficult, more costly, more time-consuming. The effect is predictable. Some businesses give up on licensing, operate informally, but informal operation creates vulnerability, creates the basis for shutdown, creates leverage. Whether businesses license or don't license, the city gains control. License, and you're regulated. Don't license, and you're vulnerable. Either way, independence is reduced. July 1928. The Economic Intelligence Division creates financial profiles of prominent Harlem residents, not just policy operators. Anyone with visible wealth, business owners, property holders, professionals. They document income sources, asset holdings, investment patterns. They're looking for discrepancies, for wealth that exceeds documented income, for success that might be funded by illegal activity, for vulnerability that can be exploited. One profile belongs to James Jackson. He owns a successful funeral home, a legitimate business, profitable, well-respected. But the profile notes he also owns 3 rental properties. And the profile questions whether his documented income is sufficient to explain his property acquisition. It's not an accusation, it's a flag, an indicator that further investigation might be warranted, that audit might reveal vulnerabilities, that pressure might be productive. Jackson is audited in August 1928. His business records are reviewed extensively. His property acquisitions are examined. His income sources are questioned. The audit finds minor irregularities, charitable donations that might have been overstated, Business expenses that might have been improperly categorized, nothing major, but enough to generate $2,800 in penalties. Jackson pays, and the message is clear. Success attracts attention. Wealth attracts scrutiny. Prominence attracts pressure. Do well, but not too well. Succeed, but not too visibly. Accumulate, but not too much. The boundaries are unwritten, but the enforcement is real. September 1928. The Economic Intelligence Division refines its methods. They develop indicators of what they call wealth inconsistent with documented income. These indicators include property acquisition exceeding mortgage capacity based on reported earnings, business expansion exceeding documented capital, lifestyle expenses exceeding visible income sources. The indicators are subjective, flexible, applicable to almost anyone. That's the point. Almost anyone can be flagged. Almost anyone can be audited. Almost anyone can be pressured. Universal vulnerability creates universal compliance. October 1928. The division coordinates with banks. Banks are required to report large cash deposits. The threshold is $1,000. Any single deposit over $1,000 gets reported to authorities. The official justification is anti-counterfeiting. The actual use is economic surveillance. The reports create records, patterns, evidence of cash holdings, information that can inform audits, that can support investigations, that can generate pressure. Harlem residents who accumulate cash face a dilemma. Deposit it, and it gets reported. Don't deposit it, and you're holding large amounts of cash that can't be used for major purchases without generating questions. The system creates pressure from both directions. Transparency creates vulnerability. Opacity creates suspicion. There's no safe option. Only choices between different types of risk. November 1928. Economic surveillance has achieved comprehensive reach. The Economic Intelligence Division has files on 847 Harlem businesses, profiles on 234 individuals with significant assets, records of 43 policy operations, documentation of 37 rotating credit associations, tracking of thousands of cash transactions. The economic life of Harlem is mapped, documented, understood, and vulnerable. The information exists. The leverage exists. The control mechanisms exist. All that remains is deployment, and deployment is selective, strategic, ongoing. December 1928. The division's annual report documents success. The city has collected $310,000 in additional taxes and penalties from Harlem businesses and residents through strategic audits and regulatory enforcement. Not from prosecuting crime, from systematically applying pressure based on economic surveillance. The policy game continues operating. The informal economy continues functioning, but both are now generating revenue for the city through indirect extraction. The surveillance has been monetized. The information has been weaponized. The economy has been controlled without being shut down. The report notes something else. Economic pressure is effective at controlling political activity. Businesses that are audited become cautious. Leaders who face penalties become careful. Organizations that are scrutinized become quiet. Economic vulnerability creates political compliance. Tax pressure produces behavioral change. Financial investigation achieves what direct repression might not. People who fear losing their businesses stop organizing. People who face regulatory scrutiny stop agitating. People who need licenses stop protesting. The economic pressure is political control disguised as administrative enforcement. The human impact is devastating. Business owners working 70-hour weeks to pay unexpected penalties. Families losing savings to back taxes they didn't know they owed. Entrepreneurs abandoning expansion plans to focus on compliance. Wealth that took years to build extracted in months through regulatory enforcement. Dreams deferred. Progress halted. Success punished. Not through illegal action. Through selective application of legal authority. Through strategic deployment of bureaucratic power. Through systematic economic surveillance. And nobody can prove it's targeted. Because the laws are real. The regulations are legitimate. The audits are legal. The penalties are justified. Everything is done correctly, procedurally, officially. The fact that it's applied selectively, that it targets black businesses disproportionately, that it's coordinated with political surveillance, that can't be proven from individual cases. You'd need to see the entire system. The comprehensive files, the coordination meetings, the strategic planning, and those remain invisible, classified, deniable. Money left trails. Amsterdam News Headquarters, 2347th Avenue, Harlem, March 14th, 1929, 10:45 a.m. Editor William Davis sits at his desk reading a letter. It's from the New York City Corporation Counsel's office. The letter informs him that the Amsterdam News is being investigated for potential violations of business licensing regulations. No specific violations listed. No evidence provided. Just potential violations that require comprehensive documentation of the newspaper's business practices. The letter requests financial records, advertising contracts, distribution agreements, and employee information. Everything, immediately. Davis knows what this is. Pressure. The Amsterdam News has been publishing for 20 years. Never had licensing problems before. Never faced investigation before. But 3 weeks ago, the newspaper published a series of articles about police surveillance in Harlem, about files being kept on residents, about informants and organizations, about coordinated pressure on businesses. The articles were carefully written, factually accurate, legally protected, and now the newspaper is being investigated. This is not coincidence. This is retaliation. This is a message. Publish articles about surveillance, and you become the target of scrutiny. Expose government activity, and government examines you. Use your press freedom and discover how vulnerable press businesses are to regulatory pressure. The connection is obvious. The causation is deniable. That's how the system works. The Amsterdam News is one of 12 black newspapers published in Harlem by 1929. Collectively, they reach 75,000 readers weekly. They cover local news, national politics, international events, cultural developments, business news, social issues. They're the primary source of information for Harlem's black community. They're independent, black-owned, black-operated, and increasingly, they're monitored, surveilled, pressured. The NYPD maintains files on all 12 newspapers. The files don't just track what the newspapers publish. They document who writes for them, who edits them, who owns them, who advertises in them, who reads them, complete documentation, comprehensive surveillance. The newspapers are treated not as businesses, but as intelligence sources and political targets. One file, marked Publication Profile, Amsterdam News, is 78 pages long. It contains copies of every article the newspaper has published about police activity in Harlem since 1926. It lists every writer by name with biographical information. It notes which articles generated the most response. It tracks circulation figures weekly. It documents advertising revenue quarterly. It identifies the newspaper's largest advertisers and notes which are dependent on city licenses or permits. The file is updated monthly, sometimes weekly when the newspaper publishes something particularly sensitive. Why track advertising? Because advertising is leverage. Businesses that advertise in black newspapers often need city licenses, business licenses, health permits, building certifications, vendor permits, taxi licenses. Any business dependent on government approval is vulnerable to pressure, and that pressure can be communicated indirectly. A business gets audited, faces violations, suddenly needs to cut costs. Where do they cut? Advertising, especially advertising in newspapers that publish articles critical of government. The connection is never stated explicitly. The business independently decides to reduce advertising. But the timing is not coincidental. The effect is not accidental. April 1929. The Amsterdam News loses 3 major advertisers in 2 weeks. A funeral home, a restaurant, a taxi service, all black-owned businesses. All recently inspected by various city departments. All facing compliance costs. all deciding to cut advertising budgets. Total loss to the newspaper, $420 monthly. That's $5,040 annually. Not enough to close the newspaper, but enough to hurt. Enough to create financial pressure. Enough to make the editor think twice before publishing sensitive articles. Davis understands this. He writes in his editorial, April 18, 1929, "We are experiencing economic pressure that we believe is connected to our editorial decisions. Advertisers are withdrawing not because of our circulation or because of our rates, but because they are facing regulatory pressure that makes advertising with us expensive. We cannot prove direct connection, but we observe patterns that are difficult to explain as coincidence. This is how press freedom is attacked in ways that leave no fingerprints." He's right, and his editorial becomes part of his file. The file now notes that Davis is aware of the pressure, that he's willing to address it publicly, that he considers it coordinated. The classification of the Amsterdam news in the surveillance database changes from observable to concerning. The level of scrutiny increases. The pressure intensifies. May 1929. The Negro World, Marcus Garvey's newspaper, faces different pressure. The newspaper has been critical of government surveillance, critical of police methods, critical of economic pressure on black businesses. The articles are legal, protected speech, but the newspaper's distribution system is vulnerable. The Negro World uses street vendors, unlicensed vendors, men who stand on corners selling papers for 5 cents. It's an informal distribution system, effective, widespread, and illegal. The NYPD begins enforcing vendor licensing laws, strictly, selectively, in Harlem. Vendors selling the Negro World are cited for operating without permits. The permit process takes 6 weeks and costs $15. Most vendors can't afford the fee, can't wait 6 weeks. They stop selling. Within 3 weeks, the Negro World loses 67 vendor locations. Circulation drops by 40%. Revenue drops proportionally. The newspaper doesn't close, but it's damaged, weakened, less influential. Mission accomplished without censorship, without prosecution, without violating press freedom, just enforcing existing regulations. Selectively, strategically, effectively. June 1929. The NYPD creates a new filing system for monitoring newspaper content. They assign officers to read every article in every black newspaper. They create summaries. They flag articles of concern. They track themes, topics that appear repeatedly, issues that generate sustained coverage, writers who consistently address sensitive subjects. The system identifies patterns, trends, emerging narratives, information that allows preemptive response. One pattern identified in June 1929, increasing coverage of economic pressure on black businesses. 7 of 12 newspapers are running articles about selective audits, about licensing difficulties, about regulatory enforcement. The coverage is factual, documented, but collectively it's creating a narrative that black businesses are being targeted, that economic surveillance is systematic, that pressure is coordinated. The narrative is accurate, but it's problematic because it exposes methods authorities prefer to keep invisible. July 1929. The response is subtle. The Corporation Counsel's office sends letters to 6 newspapers, different newspapers, similar letters, each noting potential irregularities in business practices, each requesting extensive documentation, each creating administrative burden. Time spent gathering records, money spent on legal advice, energy diverted from journalism to compliance. The investigations find nothing significant. Minor issues, easily corrected. But that's not the point. The point is the burden, the distraction, the cost, the message. Newspapers that received letters notice. Coverage of economic surveillance decreases in August, not eliminated, but reduced, less prominent, less frequent. Self-censorship. Not because anyone ordered it, because editors are making rational calculations. Continue aggressive coverage and face ongoing investigations. Reduce coverage and maybe the scrutiny stops. The choice is clear. Survival requires caution. Sustainability requires self-restraint. The pressure works without anyone explicitly telling newspapers what not to publish. August 1929. The NYPD identifies a new concern. Newspapers are starting to coordinate, to share information, to compare notes. The Harlem Journalists Association meets monthly. Editors from different newspapers discussing common problems, common pressures, common patterns. Collective understanding is dangerous, because collective understanding enables collective response. Journalists comparing experiences might identify systematic pressure that individual journalists experience as isolated incidents. The association's meetings are observed. An informant attends, a journalist who reports to police. He documents who attends, what's discussed, what's being planned. His reports are detailed. The association is beginning to understand the surveillance, beginning to document the pressure, beginning to coordinate coverage. This is problematic. This requires response. September 1929. 3 members of the Journalists Association are audited personally, not their newspapers. Them. Personal tax audits. Personal financial investigations. The audits find minor issues. Unreported income. Improperly documented deductions. The penalties are small, $100 to $300 each. But the message is clear. We can investigate you personally. We can scrutinize your private finances. We can create problems for you as individuals, not just your newspapers. The threat is personal. The pressure is individualized. The fear is intensified. The association's October meeting has 6 fewer attendees. Editors who decide that membership creates risk, that coordination attracts attention, that isolation is safer. The association continues, but it's weaker, less coordinated, less effective. The surveillance has fragmented the one organization that might have exposed the surveillance. The system protects itself by attacking those who understand it. October 1929. The monitoring expands to readership. The NYPD wants to know not just what newspapers publish, but who reads them. They use informants, people who attend meetings where newspapers are distributed, people who work in barbershops where newspapers are available, people who can report which newspapers are popular, which articles generate discussion, which issues create response. The surveillance extends from publication to consumption, from writing to reading, from production to reception. November 1929. The system is comprehensive. 12 newspapers monitored, every article tracked, every writer profiled, every editor classified, advertising relationships documented, distribution systems mapped, financial vulnerabilities identified, readership patterns observed. Press freedom exists. Newspapers can publish what they want, but they do so while being watched, while being documented, while being pressured, while being managed. Freedom exists within surveillance. Publication occurs despite scrutiny. Speech functions under observation. The files document the effectiveness. One internal memo, November 1929. Sustained monitoring of black press has produced measurable behavior modification. Critical coverage of departmental activities has decreased 37% since implementation of economic pressure campaigns. Coordination between newspapers has been disrupted through targeted investigations. The press continues operating, but with increased caution and reduced antagonism toward authorities. These results were achieved without censorship, without prosecution, without violating constitutional protections. Method is sustainable and can be expanded. Translation: We've successfully intimidated the press without violating the First Amendment. We haven't banned publication. We haven't arrested journalists. We've just made their lives difficult enough that they self-censor. They reduce critical coverage because they fear the consequences. The method works. The freedom remains. The control succeeds. December 1929. William Davis of the Amsterdam News writes another editorial, but he doesn't publish it. He writes it, edits it, prepares it. Then he locks it in his desk drawer. The editorial describes the surveillance, the pressure, the coordination, the system, everything he's observed. everything he's experienced, everything he understands. But he doesn't publish it because publishing it would generate more pressure, more investigations, more scrutiny, more cost. The editorial exists as evidence of what cannot be said, as testimony to what must remain silent, as proof of how effectively the surveillance controls speech without censoring it. This is the sophistication of the system. Speech is not banned, it's burdened. Publication is not prevented, it's pressured. Freedom is not eliminated, it's encumbered. The newspapers continue publishing, but they publish more carefully, more cautiously, more selectively. They exercise their rights, but they exercise them with awareness that exercising rights attracts consequences, that protection is legal, but cost is real, that freedom exists, but safety requires restraint. The black press in Harlem survives. Newspapers continue publishing through the 1930s, some for decades longer. They never completely stop criticizing authorities, never completely stop investigating problems, never completely stop serving their communities. But they're damaged, cautious, constrained. They know they're being watched. They know resistance has costs. They know speech creates vulnerability. And that knowledge shapes every decision, every article, every editorial, every headline. The surveillance achieves what censorship could not. Not silence, but caution. Not elimination, but constraint. Not prohibition, but pressure. The black press continues existing, but it exists under observation, under scrutiny, under control. Publishing continues, but publishing is managed. Freedom persists, but freedom is surveilled. And surveillance, even when it doesn't prevent speech, changes speech by forcing speakers to calculate cost before they speak, to measure risk before they publish, to consider consequences before they expose. Words, too, were considered weapons. West 133rd Street, Harlem, July 22nd, 1930, 11:15 p.m. A shooting. Outside a speakeasy. 2 men wounded. Both will survive. Police arrive within minutes. They secure the scene, interview witnesses, collect evidence. Standard procedure. But then something else happens. Something that has nothing to do with investigating this specific crime. Detective McKenna arrives. He's not assigned to this case. He's from the Harlem Coordination Office. He doesn't investigate the shooting. He investigates the neighborhood. He goes door to door. Not asking about the shooting, asking about organizations, about meetings, about political activity, about who lives where, about who associates with whom. He's using the shooting as justification to collect information that has nothing to do with the crime. The witnesses don't understand. Why is he asking about the Tenants League? Why does he want to know about church attendance? Why is he documenting which apartments host rent parties? What does any of this have to do with the shooting outside a speakeasy? They answer because he's police, because he has authority, because refusing to answer seems suspicious, and their answers go into files. Files that have nothing to do with solving the shooting. Files that exist to document organization, to track networks, to maintain surveillance. This is how crime becomes justification. A shooting happens, a legitimate crime, requiring legitimate investigation. But that investigation becomes a doorway, an opportunity, a justification for surveillance that has nothing to do with the crime itself. The crime is real, the investigation is real, but the surveillance piggybacks on both, using legitimate law enforcement as cover for political monitoring. By July 1930, this has become standard practice. Any crime in Harlem, no matter how minor, triggers expanded surveillance. A robbery becomes an opportunity to document who was on the street. A fight becomes an excuse to interview witnesses about their organizational affiliations. A theft becomes justification for searching premises and photographing evidence of political activity. Crime investigation and political surveillance have merged. The same officers do both. The same reports contain both. The same files hold both. And nobody can separate them because they're documented as one integrated activity. August 1930. A policy bank is raided. Finally. After years of surveillance, why now? Not because policy gambling has suddenly become intolerable, because the operator, Thomas Mitchell, has started funding political organizations. He donated $5,000 to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. He hosted fundraisers for A. Philip Randolph's union. He advertised in newspapers that criticized police. He stopped being just a criminal. He became politically active, and political activity makes criminals intolerable. The raid is dramatic. 8 officers. Late afternoon, when the bank is full of customers. 73 people arrested. Mitchell, his employees, his customers, everyone. The newspapers cover it extensively. Headlines about illegal gambling, about protecting communities, about law enforcement doing its job. Nobody mentions that this policy bank has operated openly for 6 years, that police have known about it, that they've watched it, that they've documented it, that they've done nothing until Mitchell became politically active. The raid accomplishes multiple purposes. Mitchell is prosecuted, convicted, sentenced to 3 years. His policy operation is shut down. But that's not the only goal. The raid generates a customer list. 73 names, addresses, occupations, all documented, all filed, all cross-referenced with existing surveillance databases. The NYPD now knows who gambles at this location, who bets regularly, who has disposable income to spend on numbers, information that has nothing to do with prosecuting Mitchell, information that expands surveillance under the cover of crime investigation. September 1930, the customer list is analyzed, cross-referenced. 12 of the 73 arrested are members of political organizations. 7 attend churches with active political ministries. 3 write for newspapers. 2 are union organizers. The arrests provide documentation of their presence at an illegal gambling location. Creates records that can be used for pressure, for leverage, for control. We know you were gambling. We could prosecute. Or you could cooperate. You could inform. You could stop being politically active. You could make this problem disappear. Not everyone arrested gets prosecuted. 58 of the 73 have their charges dropped. No explanation. No pattern. Some people get prosecuted. Others don't. The decisions seem arbitrary, but they're strategic. People with no political connections get released. People with organizational affiliations face continued pressure. Some get offers, inform, and the charges disappear. Cooperate, and you avoid prosecution. Help us, and we help you. The raid creates opportunities for recruitment, for coercion, for expanding the informant network. October 1930. A new strategy emerges. Selective enforcement, not stopping crime, managing crime, allowing some illegal activity, prosecuting other illegal activity. The decision based not on severity, but on political implications. Operators who stay apolitical can continue. Operators who get political get raided. Speakeasies that serve only alcohol remain open. Speakeasies that host political meetings get shut down. Gambling that's just gambling is tolerated. Gambling that funds organizing is prosecuted. This creates a system more sophisticated than blanket enforcement. It uses crime as leverage. Operators know their businesses are illegal, know they could be raided anytime, know their survival depends on police tolerance, and that tolerance depends on political neutrality. Stay out of politics, stay in business. Get political, get prosecuted. The message is clear. The compliance is widespread. Crime becomes a control mechanism. Illegality becomes leverage. Tolerance becomes conditional. Conditional on political behavior. November 1930. The strategy is documented in internal memos. One memo states explicitly, complete enforcement of vice laws in Harlem is neither possible nor desirable. Selective enforcement achieves better results. By choosing when and where to enforce, we maintain leverage over operators and create incentives for cooperation. Criminal enterprises that remain apolitical can be tolerated and monitored. Criminal enterprises that engage in political activity can be shut down. This approach allows us to use illegal activity as a management tool rather than simply as a prosecution target. Translation: we're not fighting crime. We're managing it. We're using it. We're allowing criminals to operate as long as they stay politically neutral, and we're prosecuting criminals who get political. Crime becomes our ally. Illegality becomes our leverage. Law enforcement becomes selective enforcement. Selective enforcement becomes political control. December 1930. This approach expands citywide, not just policy banks, everything. Prostitution, illegal alcohol, unlicensed businesses, labor violations, health code violations, building code violations, tax irregularities. Every form of illegality or regulatory violation becomes potential leverage. Everyone has something they're doing wrong, something that could be prosecuted, something that could be enforced. And enforcement is selective, strategic, political. Business owners who attend political meetings face building inspections. Activists who organize face tax audits. Writers who criticize police face license reviews. Ministers who preach about injustice face health department scrutiny of their churches. Nobody is prosecuted for political activity. They're prosecuted for violations discovered during investigations triggered by political activity. The connection is invisible. The pattern is deniable. The effect is total. January 1931. Crime statistics become political tools. The NYPD releases annual crime reports. The reports show Harlem has higher crime rates than white neighborhoods, higher arrests, higher prosecutions, higher incarceration. The statistics are presented as evidence of Harlem's inherent criminality, of black communities' problems, of need for increased police presence, for more surveillance, for more control. But the statistics reflect enforcement patterns, not crime patterns. Harlem is policed more intensively than white neighborhoods. More officers per capita, more surveillance, more attention, more arrests. The increased arrests generate higher statistics. The higher statistics justify more enforcement. The cycle is self-reinforcing. Heavy policing creates high arrest rates. High arrest rates justify heavy policing. Crime statistics become evidence of the need for the system that creates them. The statistics are also selective. They count arrests, not crimes. Enforcement, not violations. Prosecution, not behavior. They reflect what police choose to address, not what's actually happening. Policy gambling arrests are high because policy gambling is targeted. Speakeasy violations are numerous because speakeasies are raided. The statistics document enforcement decisions disguised as crime realities. They make political choices look like objective facts. They turn selective enforcement into evidence of selective criminality. February 1931. The statistics are used to expand surveillance. The mayor requests increased funding for police in Harlem. Justification: high crime rates. The city council approves. 20 additional officers assigned to Harlem, not to investigate specific crimes, to maintain order, to monitor activity, to sustain surveillance. Crime statistics generate resources that enable more surveillance, that generates more arrests, that produce higher statistics, that justify more resources. The system perpetuates itself. March 1931. A new category appears in police reports. Known associates of criminal elements. This category includes people who have never been arrested, never been charged, never committed crimes, but who know people who have, who live near, who work with, who socialize with. Association becomes suspicion. Proximity becomes evidence. Relationship becomes indicator of potential criminality. The category is used for surveillance justification. Why are you watching this person? They're known associates of criminal elements. Why are you documenting their activities? They're connected to criminal networks. Why are you maintaining files on them? They're potential participants in illegal activity. The logic is circular. The justification is self-fulfilling. Anyone can be classified as associated with criminals because everyone in Harlem knows someone who has been arrested. High arrest rates make everyone a potential associate, making everyone a legitimate surveillance target. April 1931. Crime becomes infrastructure, Not an opposition to the surveillance system, not an obstacle, but a component, a tool, a mechanism that enables everything else. Crime justifies surveillance. Illegality creates leverage. Violations enable pressure. Enforcement becomes selective. Prosecution becomes strategic. Statistics become political. And all of it is legal. All of it is justified as law enforcement. All of it is dressed in the language of public safety and crime prevention. The reality is more complex. Crime exists in Harlem. Real crime, robbery, assault, theft, crimes that harm people, crimes that require investigation, crimes that deserve prosecution. But those crimes are being used, exploited, weaponized. The response to crime is no longer just about stopping crime. It's about using crime to justify surveillance, to create leverage, to maintain control. Crime is being managed, not eliminated. Tolerated when useful. Prosecuted when convenient. Deployed as justification for systems that have nothing to do with crime and everything to do with political control. May 1931. The files reflect this reality. Crime reports mixed with organizational surveillance. Arrest records next to political profiles. Criminal investigations alongside monitoring of legal activity. The categories have blurred. The boundaries have dissolved. The systems have merged. Police are simultaneously fighting crime and conducting political surveillance. The same officers, the same reports, the same files, the same infrastructure. Crime and politics, law enforcement and social control, public safety and political management. All one system, all one operation, all one purpose. And Harlem residents can't distinguish between legitimate law enforcement and political surveillance. When police ask questions, are they investigating crimes or documenting organizations? When raids happen, are they stopping illegal activity or pressuring political operators? When arrests occur, are they prosecuting criminals or recruiting informants? The answer is often both, simultaneously, inseparably. Crime investigation is political surveillance. Political surveillance is crime investigation. They're the same thing because the system has made them the same thing. June 1931. A. Philip Randolph writes about this confusion. We cannot trust police because we cannot determine their motives. When they investigate crimes, they're also investigating us. When they enforce laws, they're also enforcing political control. When they protect communities, they're also monitoring communities. The same actions serve multiple purposes. The same authority enables multiple systems. We need legitimate law enforcement, but we're receiving surveillance disguised as law enforcement. And we cannot separate them because they're delivered by the same people, using the same methods, producing the same records, serving different purposes simultaneously. He's describing the sophistication of the system. It doesn't choose between crime fighting and political surveillance. It does both, simultaneously, using each to justify the other, using each to enable the other. Crime justifies surveillance, surveillance discovers crime. Crime statistics justify more surveillance. More surveillance generates more crime statistics. The cycle is perfect. The system is self-sustaining. The justification is permanent. Protection became permission. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Field Office, 370 Lexington Avenue, Manhattan. October 15th, 1931, 2:30 p.m. Special Agent Thomas Walsh opens a folder. Inside, a report from the NYPD, 200 pages. Complete documentation of surveillance activities in Harlem. Watch lists, organizational files, informant networks, economic monitoring, press surveillance. Everything the city has built over 7 years, and the NYPD is sharing it. Not because they have to, because they want to. Because Harlem is no longer just a local concern. It's becoming a federal interest. Walsh reads carefully. He's impressed. The NYPD has created sophisticated infrastructure, comprehensive documentation, systematic surveillance, methods that could be replicated elsewhere, insights that could inform federal operations. He makes notes, highlights sections, marks pages for copying. This information is valuable. This system is exportable. This model is scalable. Why is the FBI interested in Harlem? Because by 1931, federal authorities have decided that black political activity is a national security concern, not a criminal matter, not a civil rights issue, a security matter. Organizations like the NAACP, like Philip Randolph's Union, like Marcus Garvey's movement, they're operating in multiple cities, coordinating across state lines, building national networks, and federal authorities believe national movements require federal surveillance. The NYPD files provide a template. They show how to monitor organizations, how to build informant networks, how to coordinate with other agencies, how to use economic pressure, how to manage media. Everything the FBI needs to know to implement similar systems elsewhere. The files are being shared not just as information, but as instruction, as methodology, as proof that systematic surveillance of black political activity is possible, productive, and sustainable. November 1931. The FBI establishes coordination with the NYPD. Regular meetings, information sharing, joint planning. The relationship is formalized. The NYPD provides local intelligence. The FBI provides national context. Together, they create a more comprehensive picture. Who travels to other cities? Who corresponds with activists elsewhere? Who's part of national organizations? Who's building networks that cross state boundaries? Local surveillance connects to national surveillance. City files merge with federal files. The system expands. December 1931. The FBI opens its own investigation of Harlem organizations, not duplicating NYPD surveillance, complementing it. The FBI focuses on federal crimes, mail fraud, interstate transportation of illegal goods, tax evasion, crimes with federal jurisdiction. But like the NYPD, the FBI's investigation is broader than its stated purpose. They're not just investigating federal crimes. They're monitoring political activity that happens to cross state lines. They're documenting organizations that happen to operate nationally. They're watching people who happen to travel. One target is Philip Randolph. His Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters operates in 12 cities. Members travel constantly. The organization communicates by mail. It's inherently interstate, inherently federal. The FBI opens a file, not because Randolph is breaking federal laws, because his organization fits federal jurisdiction, because interstate activity creates federal authority, because national scope justifies federal surveillance. The FBI file on Randolph is labeled Security Matter, not Criminal Investigation. Security Matter. The label is significant. Security matters don't require evidence of crimes, don't require probable cause, don't require normal investigative standards. Security matters can be opened based on concern, based on potential, based on precaution. The standard is lower. The authority is broader. The justification is self-validating. January 1932. The FBI begins coordinating surveillance across cities. Randolph travels to Chicago. The FBI Chicago office observes, documents who he meets, where he goes, what he says publicly. Reports are filed, shared with New York, shared with other offices. Randolph travels to Detroit. Same process. Philadelphia. Same process. St. Louis. Same process. Every city he visits, the FBI documents. Every speech he gives, they record. Every meeting he attends, they observe. The surveillance is national, coordinated, comprehensive. February 1932. The FBI introduces a new tool, mail monitoring. Randolph's mail is observed, not opened. That would require warrants, but observed. Who's he writing to? Who's writing to him? Return address is documented. Frequency noted. Patterns established. The FBI calls this mail cover. Legal. No warrant needed. Just observation of external information, but revealing. Mail cover shows networks, shows coordination, shows communication patterns, shows organization structure, all without ever reading content. March 1932, the FBI expands mail monitoring to other targets. James Weldon Johnson. NAA, CP Leadership. Negro World Editors. Anyone politically active. Anyone organizationally significant. Anyone communicating across state lines. The mail monitoring reveals national networks. Shows who corresponds with whom. Which organizations coordinate. Which leaders are connected. Information that supplements local surveillance with national context. April 1932. Federal attention brings resources. The FBI has larger budget than local police. Better equipment. More personnel. National reach. They bring these resources to Harlem surveillance, not replacing NYPD operations, augmenting them. Federal agents attend meetings NYPD can't cover. Federal surveillance reaches places local police can't go. Federal files contain information local files don't have. The systems merge. Complement. Multiply. May 1932. The FBI shares methodology. They teach NYPD agents about mail monitoring, about interstate surveillance coordination, about security matter classifications, about informant management techniques, about file systems, about analysis methods. Information flows both directions. NYPD teaches FBI about local infiltration, about economic pressure, about media management, about community surveillance. Each agency learns from the other. Each system improves. Each approach strengthens. June 1932. Joint operations begin. NYPD identifies a target. FBI provides interstate surveillance. NYPD maintains local files. FBI maintains national files. NYPD handles local pressure. FBI applies federal pressure. The collaboration is seamless, efficient, powerful. Targets don't know they're being watched by two agencies. Don't know local observation connects to national surveillance. Don't know city files merge with federal files. The system is invisible. The coordination is hidden. The extent is unknown. July 1932. Federal interest legitimizes local surveillance. When the FBI opens investigations, it signals importance. It says these targets matter not just locally, but nationally. It justifies increased resources, more attention, broader authority. The NYPD can say, the FBI is investigating this. Therefore, we should too. Therefore, we need more officers, more funding, more authority. Federal involvement validates local operations, makes them seem more important, more necessary, more justified. August 1932. The FBI develops a theory. They call it Negro radicalism. The theory states that black political activity, particularly activity advocating for equality or challenging existing structures, is inherently radical, inherently concerning, inherently requiring surveillance, not because it's illegal, because it's destabilizing, because it challenges racial hierarchy, because it suggests social change. The theory is not formally documented, not officially endorsed, but it guides decisions, shapes priorities, justifies actions. Under this theory, almost any black political activity becomes suspicious. Advocating for voting rights, radical. Organizing unions, radical. Publishing newspapers, radical. Teaching literacy, radical. Building institutions, radical. The label is flexible, applicable broadly, useful for justifying surveillance of virtually any organized black activity. The theory makes political activity inherently suspect, makes organization inherently concerning, makes leadership inherently worthy of monitoring. September 1932. Federal classifications are more severe than local. The NYPD has 4 levels: compliant, observable, concerning, threatening. The FBI has different categories: security risk, potential agitator, subversive element. Each category carries implications. Security risk means continuous monitoring. Potential agitator means preemptive attention. Subversive element means active disruption. The categories are subjective. The standards are unclear. The classifications are permanent. Randolph is classified as security risk. James Weldon Johnson is classified as potential agitator. Marcus Garvey, before his deportation, was classified as subversive element. The classifications don't require proof of illegal activity, don't require evidence of specific threats, just concern, just suspicion, just belief that someone might do something concerning. The standard is preventive, the logic is preemptive, the authority is self-granted. October 1932. Federal surveillance expands beyond individuals. The FBI begins monitoring organizations comprehensively. They want complete membership lists, complete financial records, complete communication networks, not for prosecution, for understanding, for mapping, for control. They use the same methods as local police: informants, economic pressure, regulatory coordination, but at national scale, across multiple cities, involving multiple agencies. The surveillance is systemic, comprehensive, overwhelming. November 1932. Coordination reaches new levels. The FBI, NYPD, Department of Labor, Department of Justice, Post Office, Treasury Department. 6 federal and local agencies now sharing information about Harlem activists and organizations. Each agency has different jurisdiction, different authority, different methods, but all share files, all coordinate actions, all support each other's operations. The network of surveillance is complete. The infrastructure is total. The reach is unlimited. December 1932. Federal involvement changes the nature of surveillance. It's no longer just about controlling Harlem. It's about controlling a movement, a national movement for black equality, for civil rights, for political power. Harlem is the center, but the surveillance extends everywhere black people are organizing. Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles. Every city with significant black political activity. Every location with growing organizational capacity. Every place where people are building power. The surveillance becomes strategic, national, coordinated. It's not about individual crimes or local disturbances. It's about managing a population, controlling a movement, preventing change. The methods are sophisticated. The reach is comprehensive. The purpose is clear. Keep black political activity contained, monitored, documented, disrupted when necessary, prevented when possible, managed always. January 1933. The infrastructure is complete. Federal-local coordination established. Information sharing systems functioning. Cross-jurisdictional operations routine. National surveillance networks operational. Files comprehensive. Monitoring systematic. Methods refined. The system that started in Harlem in 1923 has become national by 1933. What began as city surveillance has become federal operation. What started as local concern has become national security matter. And the targets don't fully understand. They know they're being watched locally. They suspect broader surveillance, but they don't know the scale, don't know the coordination, don't know that city files are federal files, that local observation is national surveillance, that their activities in New York are being documented by agents in Washington, that their movements across cities are being tracked by coordinated networks. The surveillance is more extensive than they imagine. The documentation is more comprehensive. The coordination is more sophisticated. February 1933. Agent Walsh writes a report summarizing the first year of federal-local coordination. The Harlem surveillance model has proven highly effective and readily adaptable to other locations. Coordination between federal and local authorities has produced comprehensive intelligence while maintaining legal compliance and operational security. The methods developed in Harlem can and should be implemented in other cities with significant Negro political activity. The infrastructure exists. The methodology is proven. The justification is clear. Negro radicalism requires national response. Harlem has shown us how to provide it. Translation: we've figured out how to watch black people systematically, how to monitor their organizations, how to document their activities, how to disrupt their movements. We've done it legally. We've done it invisibly. We've done it in Harlem. Now we can do it everywhere. The surveillance is scalable. The methods are replicable. The control is exportable. Harlem was the laboratory. The rest of the country is the experiment. Harlem was no longer a local issue. St. Philip's Episcopal Church, 214 West 134th Street, Harlem, March 7th, 1934. 6 a.m., before sunrise. Before most of the congregation knows anything is wrong, city inspectors arrive, 8 of them. They have paperwork, an emergency closure order. The church building has been condemned. Structural violations, safety concerns, immediate closure required. The rector, Reverend Shelton Hale Bishop, is confused. The building was inspected 6 months ago. Passed. No violations, no problems. What changed? Nothing changed with the building. What changed was the church's activities. 3 months ago, St. Philip's began hosting meetings for the Harlem Tenants League, organizing sessions, strategy discussions, planning meetings, legal gatherings, protected activities, but activities that attracted attention, activities that triggered response, not prosecution, not raids, not arrests, just an inspection, just a report, just violations, just closure. The violations are real. Cracks in plaster, insufficient fire exits, electrical wiring that doesn't meet code, old building problems, problems that exist in hundreds of Harlem buildings, problems that are rarely enforced, rarely noticed, rarely addressed, unless the building is hosting political organizing. Then suddenly, problems matter. Violations get enforced. Safety becomes urgent. Closure becomes necessary. The church appeals, provides documentation, hires lawyers, files paperwork. The process takes 9 months. 9 months the building is closed. 9 months the congregation can't meet. 9 months the organizing stops. The building eventually reopens. January 1935. The violations are fixed. The church functions again. But the Tenants League has found other meeting spaces. The organizing momentum is broken. The coordination is disrupted. The closure achieved its purpose without ever appearing political. Just enforcement. Just safety. Just compliance. This is the quiet war. No headlines. No dramatic confrontations. No visible suppression. Just regulations. Just inspections. Just violations. Just closures. Just bureaucratic obstacles. Just administrative pressure. Organizations aren't banned. They're inspected. Leaders aren't arrested. They're audited. Movements aren't suppressed. They're managed. Through paperwork. Through regulations. Through compliance requirements. Through quiet, invisible, bureaucratic pressure. April 1934. A pattern emerges. Venues that host political meetings face increased inspections. Buildings that house activist organizations receive violation notices. Spaces where organizing happens get closed for repairs. Not everywhere. Not everyone. Just enough. Just strategic. Just disruptive. The pattern is invisible unless you're tracking multiple incidents. Unless you're seeing the whole picture. Unless you're documenting what authorities are documenting, but from the other side. The Amsterdam News Building. Inspected. Violations found. Required to close for repairs for 3 weeks. Reopens. The Negro World offices. Inspected. Violations found. Closed for repairs for 6 weeks. Reopens. Small's Paradise nightclub. Also meeting space. Also organizing venue. Inspected. Violations found. Closed for repairs for 4 months. Reopens. The pattern repeats. Political activity triggers inspection. Inspection finds violations. Violations require closure. Closure disrupts organizing. Disruption succeeds without confrontation. May 1934. The quiet war expands to licensing. Business licenses. Vendor permits. Liquor licenses. Cabaret licenses. Entertainment permits. Every license has requirements. Every permit has regulations. Every authorization has conditions. And compliance is checked. Selectively. Strategically. Politically. Businesses that stay neutral get minimal attention. Businesses that get political get scrutinized. The scrutiny finds problems. Problems create obstacles. Obstacles reduce organizing. One example. Calvin Peters owns a restaurant. He's also a Tenants League organizer. His restaurant has a cabaret license, allows live music, entertainment, dancing. The license requires monthly renewals. Peters has renewed routinely for 3 years. No problems. Then in June 1934, after he speaks at a political rally, his renewal is delayed. No explanation, just delayed. Weeks pass. The license expires. He can't have music, can't have entertainment. Customers decrease, revenue drops. He spends hours at city offices, filing paperwork, requesting status, getting nowhere. The renewal eventually comes. September 1934. 3 months late. The restaurant survives, but Peters stops organizing, stops speaking, stops being visible. The delay worked. The pressure succeeded. The war won without fighting. July 1934. Another tactic. Permit denials. The Harlem Businessmen's Club wants to hold a public meeting. They need a permit. Street use permit for outdoor gathering. They apply. Standard process. They've done it before. But this time, the application is denied. Insufficient notice. Improper paperwork. Technical deficiencies. The club reapplies. Corrects everything. Denied again. Different reasons. Public safety concerns. Traffic impact. Noise complaints. The club tries a third time. Denied. No explanation. The meeting never happens. The organizing is prevented without banning it. Just denying permits. Just enforcing procedure. Just following regulations. August 1934. These tactics are documented in internal memos. One memo states, direct suppression of Negro political activity would generate legal challenges and public controversy. Regulatory enforcement achieves the same results without legal risk or public attention. Organizations cannot challenge closures for legitimate safety violations, cannot appeal license denials based on proper procedural grounds, cannot fight inspections that follow standard protocols. The method is effective because it's boring, because it appears administrative rather than political, because it's invisible to everyone except the targets. Translation: we're suppressing political activity through bureaucracy, through regulations, through procedures. It's invisible because it's boring. Nobody pays attention to building inspections. Nobody cares about license renewals. Nobody tracks permit applications. We can disrupt organizing without anyone noticing because the disruption looks like normal government administration. The quiet war is quiet because it's disguised as routine government business. September 1934. The quiet war uses time as a weapon. Compliance takes time. Appealing takes time. Reapplying takes time. Fixing violations takes time. Fighting closures takes time. Time organizers could spend organizing. Time leaders could spend leading. Time movements could spend moving. The time gets absorbed by bureaucracy, by procedures, by compliance, by fighting administrative battles that consume resources and produce no organizing results. October 1934. Financial pressure intensifies. Fines for violations. Penalties for noncompliance. Fees for appeals. Costs for repairs. Legal expenses for fighting closures. Every administrative obstacle creates financial burden. Organizations with limited resources face choices. Pay fines or pay organizers. Fix violations or fund programs. Fight closures or maintain operations. The choices are impossible. The financial pressure is devastating. The quiet war is expensive, makes organizing cost more than most organizations can afford. November 1934. Some organizations stop using fixed locations. They start meeting in homes, in parks, in rotating locations, mobile organizing, flexible gatherings, trying to avoid the regulatory pressure by avoiding regulated spaces. But this creates new problems. Harder to communicate meeting locations, harder to maintain consistent participation, harder to build stable organizations. The adaptation to surveillance becomes its own limitation. The response to pressure becomes another form of disruption. December 1934. The quiet war is comprehensive, but invisible. No newspaper covers building inspections. No one reports on license delays. No one notices permit denials. Each incident seems isolated, random, unconnected. Only the targets see the pattern. Only the organizations experience the coordination. Only the leaders recognize the strategy. Everyone else sees routine government administration, boring bureaucracy, standard procedure. The invisibility is the power. The quiet is the weapon. The war succeeds because no one knows it's happening. January 1935. Federal agencies join the quiet war. IRS audits target political activists. Not visibly, not obviously. Just routine audits. Random selections. Standard procedure. But the targets aren't random. They're selected based on surveillance, based on files, based on political activity. The audits find problems, small problems. Everyone has some tax irregularities, some unreported income, some improper deductions. The problems create penalties, create financial pressure, create fear, create compliance. The IRS becomes another weapon, another tool, another component of the quiet war. February 1935. The post office joins. Mail gets delayed. Newspapers miss delivery deadlines. Organizational correspondence takes weeks. Not stopped. Not seized. Just delayed. Technical problems. Sorting issues. Transportation difficulties. Plausible explanations. But the delays are systematic. The mail to political organizations is slower than other mail. The newspapers are later than other publications. The correspondence arrives too late to be useful. The delays disrupt. The disruption succeeds. The post office becomes infrastructure for the quiet war. March 1935. The Department of Labor joins. Union organizers face increased scrutiny. Labor law violations are investigated, not in all industries. Just in industries where black workers are organizing. Not in all companies. Just in companies where unions are gaining traction. The investigations find violations. Companies face penalties, but the penalties include restrictions on organizing, on union activities, on worker meetings. The violations are real. The enforcement is selective. The result is disruption of labor organizing. April 1935. 6 federal agencies, 5 city departments, all coordinating, all applying pressure, all disrupting organizing, all doing it quietly, through inspections, through audits, through delays, through denials, through regulations, through procedures, through bureaucracy. No confrontation, no suppression, no visible repression, just administration, just enforcement, just compliance. The quiet war is total, comprehensive, devastating, and invisible. May 1935. The psychological impact is severe. Organizations don't know when the next inspection will come, when the next audit will happen, when the next license will be delayed, when the next permit will be denied. The uncertainty is paralyzing. Planning becomes impossible. Long-term strategy becomes pointless. Investment in infrastructure becomes risky. Why rent office space if it might be closed? Why hire staff if revenue might disappear? Why organize publicly if visibility creates regulatory attention? The fear itself disrupts. The uncertainty itself controls. The threat itself achieves what enforcement might not. June 1935. Some leaders break. Stop organizing. Stop speaking. Stop being visible. Not because they're threatened directly. Because the pressure is unsustainable. Because fighting bureaucracy is exhausting. Because administrative battles consume everything. Because the quiet war makes organizing impossible, not by banning it, but by making it too difficult, too expensive, too risky, too uncertain to continue. They stop, not because they want to, but because continuing requires resources they don't have. Energy they can't sustain. Sacrifice they can't afford. The quiet war wins through attrition, through exhaustion, through accumulated pressure that never explodes, but never stops. July 1935. A. Philip Randolph describes the quiet war in The Messenger. We are not being attacked openly. We are being administered to death. Not suppressed, but inspected. Not banned, but regulated. Not arrested, but delayed. Not prosecuted, but audited. The effect is the same. Our organizing is being destroyed, but it's being destroyed quietly, through methods nobody can challenge, through procedures nobody can fight, through systems nobody can prove are coordinated. We're losing a war that doesn't look like a war. That's being fought with paperwork instead of police. That's being won by bureaucrats instead of battalions. And we have no defense because you cannot defend against what appears to be normal government administration. He's describing the sophistication of the system. It's not dramatic. It's bureaucratic. It's not violent. It's administrative. It's not visible. It's routine. That's what makes it effective. That's what makes it sustainable. That's what makes it devastating. The quiet war doesn't need headlines, doesn't need confrontation, doesn't need visibility. It just needs bureaucracy, just needs regulations, just needs selective enforcement of rules that everyone violates, but only some people get punished for. August 1935. The files document the success. One report. Regulatory disruption has proven more effective than direct enforcement. Organizations are failing, not because we're shutting them down, but because we're making operation unsustainable. The method requires patience, but produces permanent results. Organizations that collapse under regulatory pressure don't recover. Leaders who exhaust themselves fighting bureaucracy don't resume organizing. The quiet war achieves complete victory through accumulated small defeats. No single action is devastating. The totality is overwhelming. Translation: we're winning. We're destroying organizing capacity. We're exhausting leaders. We're breaking movements. We're doing it quietly, slowly, invisibly, but completely. Organizations are collapsing. Not because we banned them, because we made them impossible. The quiet war is working. The control is succeeding. The victory is total. And nobody knows because nobody's watching paperwork. Nobody's tracking inspections. Nobody's connecting individual administrative actions to systematic political suppression. Control doesn't need spectacle. A basement apartment, address withheld. September 12th, 1935, 8:45 p.m. 12 people sitting in a circle. No formal meeting. No agenda. No minutes. Just conversation. They're discussing rent strikes, strategy, coordination. But they're not calling it a meeting. They're calling it a dinner party. And if anyone asks, that's what it was. Friends gathering, eating, talking. Nothing organized. Nothing formal. Nothing that requires documentation or permits or inspection. This is adaptation. Not resistance. Not confrontation. Not open defiance. Just adjustment. Changing methods. Altering approaches. Finding ways to organize that don't look like organizing. To meet without meeting. To coordinate without coordinating. To maintain movement without maintaining structures that can be documented, monitored, disrupted. Survival requires invisibility. The adaptation begins with language. Organizations stop calling themselves organizations. The Harlem Tenants League becomes friends who help with housing issues. The Businessmen's Club becomes people who know each other and talk about commerce. The political action committees become social gatherings, not to deceive, to survive, because organizations get surveilled, associations get infiltrated, structures get documented. But friends just gathering? That's social. That's invisible. That's safe. October 1935. Meeting patterns change. No regular schedules. No fixed locations. No announced gatherings. Information spreads through networks. Word of mouth. Personal contacts. Trusted connections. If you need to know, you'll be told. If you're told, you're trusted. If you're not told, maybe you're not trusted. Maybe you're an informant. Maybe you're being watched. Trust becomes the organizational principle. Personal relationships become the infrastructure. Networks replace institutions. This makes organizing harder. Coordination requires communication. Communication requires visibility. Visibility creates vulnerability. The adaptation reduces vulnerability by reducing visibility, but it also reduces effectiveness. Can't build large movements through personal networks. Can't coordinate complex actions through word of mouth. Can't sustain long-term campaigns through informal gatherings. The adaptation to surveillance becomes its own limitation. Safety reduces capacity. Invisibility reduces scale. Protection reduces power. November 1935. Financial systems adapt. Organizations stop maintaining bank accounts. Stop documenting donations. Stop creating financial records that can be audited, analyzed, leveraged. Money moves through informal networks, cash transactions, personal loans, rotating credit associations. No documentation, no trails, no vulnerability, but also no accountability, no transparency, no proof of how money is used. The adaptation to financial surveillance creates new problems. Distrust, suspicion, questions about whether money is being used appropriately. The cure creates different symptoms. December 1935. Communication methods change. Organizations stop publishing newsletters, stop distributing literature, stop creating documents that can be seized, analyzed, used against them. Information spreads orally, through conversations, through trusted messengers, through encoded language that means one thing to insiders and something else to outsiders. Cultural camouflage, invisible communication, safe information, but also limited reach. Can't mobilize large numbers through oral networks. Can't spread ideas widely through personal conversation. Can't build movements at scale through invisible communication. The adaptation protects, but also constrains. January 1936. Some organizations embrace cultural activities as camouflage. A political organization becomes a social club, meets to play cards, discuss sports, tell stories. But while playing cards, they're also discussing strategy. While talking about sports, they're coordinating action. While telling stories, they're planning resistance. The real work happens inside apparent leisure. The organizing hides inside social activity. Surveillance sees entertainment. Participants know different. The Harlem Cultural Association is perfect example. Founded January 1936. Officially, it's a literary society. Discusses books, hosts readings, sponsors cultural events. Police files note it's a cultural organization. Not particularly concerning, but members know differently. The literary discussions are political discussions disguised as literary analysis. The poetry readings are coded messages. The cultural events are organizing opportunities. Everything is dual purpose. Everything means more than it appears. The camouflage is complete. February 1936. Religious institutions become organizing spaces. Because churches are protected. Harder to surveil. Harder to infiltrate. Harder to shut down. Religious freedom provides cover. Sunday services are still Sunday services, but Wednesday prayer meetings might include political discussion. Bible study groups might study social justice. Church committees might coordinate community action. Everything is technically religious. Everything is legally protected. Everything serves dual purpose. But this creates tension. Some ministers resist. Religion shouldn't be political. Churches shouldn't be organizing spaces. Faith shouldn't be weaponized. The debate divides communities. Some churches embrace the role, others refuse. The adaptation creates conflict, creates division, creates another cost. March 1936. Personal relationships become organizational infrastructure. Leaders don't coordinate through meetings. They coordinate through friendships, through family connections, through social networks that appear personal, but function organizationally. Your cousin knows someone. That someone knows someone else. Information flows through relationship networks. Action gets coordinated through personal connections. Organization happens through social infrastructure. This makes surveillance harder. Can't monitor friendships. Can't infiltrate families. Can't document social relationships as organizational structure. But it also makes organizing harder. Personal networks are small. Family connections are limited. Social infrastructure is slow. Can't scale through personal relationships. can't move quickly through friendship networks, can't coordinate large actions through social connections. The adaptation works defensively, but limits offensive capacity. April 1936. Economic activity adapts. Black businesses stop advertising political support, stop hosting political meetings, stop making political statements. Not because they stop believing, because visibility creates vulnerability, because political association attracts regulatory attention, because business survival requires political invisibility. The businesses continue existing, continue serving communities, continue building economic power, but silently, invisibly, safely. This creates economic stability, but political isolation. Businesses survive by staying apolitical. But apolitical businesses can't support movements, can't fund organizing, can't provide resources. Economic power becomes separated from political power. The adaptation preserves businesses, but reduces movement resources. Protection requires separation. Separation reduces capacity. May 1936. Leadership adapts. Visible leaders step back. They're too watched, too documented, too vulnerable. They become symbolic, inspirational, but not operational. Operational leadership moves to people who aren't watched, who aren't filed, who aren't classified. Unknown people, invisible people, people surveillance hasn't identified yet. The movement continues, but with different leaders. Hidden leaders, safe leaders, less visible leaders. This preserves leadership capacity, but reduces leadership authority. Unknown leaders can't inspire like known leaders. Invisible leaders can't mobilize like visible leaders. Hidden leaders can't coordinate like open leaders. The adaptation preserves leadership function, but reduces leadership power. Safety requires obscurity. Obscurity reduces influence. June 1936. Information management becomes critical. What can be written down? What must stay oral? What can be shared? What must stay limited? Every document is potential evidence. Every written communication is potential surveillance. Every recorded decision is potential vulnerability. Organizations develop elaborate protocols. What gets documented? What stays in memory? What gets communicated? What stays implied? Information management becomes survival skill, but memory is imperfect. Oral traditions drift. Undocumented decisions get forgotten. The adaptation to surveillance creates organizational amnesia. Movements lose their own history. Organizations forget their own decisions. Leaders can't reference documentation that doesn't exist. The protection creates loss. The safety creates forgetting. The adaptation succeeds defensively, but fails historically. July 1936. Some people leave, too tired, too scared, too uncertain, too burdened. The constant adaptation is exhausting. The perpetual caution is paralyzing. The endless invisibility is isolating. They stop organizing not because they're forced to, but because continuing requires energy they don't have. Sacrifice they can't sustain. Commitment that consumes everything. The adaptation succeeds in making organizing survivable, but can't make it sustainable. People adapt until they can't anymore. Then they stop. August 1936. Young people create new methods. They don't know the old ways, don't remember when organizing was visible. They grow up with surveillance as normal, with invisibility as necessary, with adaptation as baseline. They develop methods that assume constant observation, that incorporate surveillance into strategy, that treat monitoring as environmental condition rather than temporary problem. They organize differently because they've never organized any other way. This creates generation gap. Older organizers remember when organizing was open, when meetings were public, when structures were formal. They see adaptation as temporary, as defensive, as less than ideal. Young organizers see it as permanent, as normal, as the only possibility. The gap creates conflict, creates misunderstanding, creates division between those who remember different times and those who only know this time. September 1936. Adaptation becomes culture, not just strategy. Culture, ways of speaking, ways of meeting, ways of organizing, ways of being. A culture built around surveillance, around invisibility, around constant caution, around perpetual adaptation. The culture is sophisticated, effective, protective, but it's also limiting, exhausting, isolating. Culture built around defense can't easily shift to offense. Methods designed for survival struggle with growth. Approaches optimized for invisibility struggle with mobilization. October 1936. The adaptation is comprehensive but incomplete. Some things work, some things don't. Organizations survive, but weaker. Leadership continues, but hidden. Organizing persists, but slower. Movements exist, but smaller. Harlem hasn't stopped organizing, hasn't stopped resisting, hasn't stopped building, but it's doing everything differently. Quietly, invisibly, carefully. Constantly adapting to constant surveillance. Constantly adjusting to constant pressure. Constantly changing to survive constant observation. November 1936. The adaptation has costs. Organizations are smaller. Coordination is harder. Mobilization is slower. Documentation is missing. History is lost. Leadership is hidden. Resources are reduced. Everything is more difficult. Everything takes longer. Everything requires more energy. The adaptation enables survival, but makes success harder. Preserves organizing capacity, but reduces organizing effectiveness. Protects movements, but limits movements. Creates safety, but reduces power. December 1936. Some adaptations are sustainable. Personal networks, cultural camouflage, religious organizing. These can continue indefinitely. They're not temporary defensive measures. They're permanent alternative methods. Harlem is creating new organizational forms, new resistance practices, new ways of building power under surveillance. Not ideal ways, not chosen ways, but functional ways, sustainable ways, ways that work despite observation, ways that survive despite pressure, ways that continue despite control. But other adaptations are unsustainable. Financial invisibility creates distrust. Communication limitations reduce reach. Leadership obscurity reduces inspiration. Constant caution creates exhaustion. These adaptations work temporarily, protect defensively, but can't sustain long-term organizing, can't build lasting movements, can't create permanent change. They're survival mechanisms, not growth strategies. They keep organizing alive, but can't make organizing thrive. January 1937. Harlem has adapted to surveillance by becoming less visible, less formal, less documented, less organized in traditional ways, but still organized, still functional, still resistant. The adaptation is impressive, sophisticated, creative. Harlem has found ways to continue organizing under conditions designed to make organizing impossible, has maintained resistance under systems designed to eliminate resistance, has preserved community power under surveillance designed to destroy community power. But the adaptation itself is evidence of the surveillance's success, because organization should be visible, should be formal, should be documented, should be open. When organization must be invisible to survive, surveillance has already won something significant. When resistance must hide to continue, control has already achieved partial victory. When power must camouflage to exist, surveillance has already accomplished substantial containment. The adaptation is both resistance and concession, both defiance and accommodation, both survival and surrender. Harlem continues organizing, but differently. Continues resisting, but quietly. Continues building, but invisibly. The adaptation proves resilience, but it also proves the effectiveness of what it's adapting to. Both things are true. Both things matter. Both things remain. Survival required invisibility. Dr. Margaret Davis sits in her Harlem office, November 3rd, 1937, 2 p.m. She's a psychologist. one of the few in Harlem. For the past year, she's been documenting something she doesn't fully understand. A pattern. Symptoms appearing across different patients, not connected to each other, not aware they share experiences, but presenting similar problems. Anxiety, hypervigilance, trust issues, paranoia, social withdrawal, exhaustion. She calls it surveillance fatigue. The cost of being constantly watched. One patient is a minister. He used to speak freely. Now he chooses every word carefully, even in private conversation, even with family. He can't stop being cautious, can't turn off the self-monitoring, can't relax. Every sentence is analyzed before speaking. Every thought is censored before expressing. The caution has become automatic, unconscious, permanent. He's editing himself in his own mind. The surveillance is inside him now, internal, inescapable. Another patient is a business owner. She's developed compulsive checking behaviors, checks her records constantly, recounts receipts repeatedly, reviews inventory obsessively, not because anything is wrong, because she fears audit, fears inspection, fears discovery. The fear is rational. Audits happen, inspections occur, discovery is possible, but the fear has become pathological, consuming, debilitating. She spends more time preparing for possible audit than running her business. The surveillance hasn't destroyed her business. Her response to surveillance is destroying it. December 1937. Dr. Davis presents her findings to a medical conference, not in Harlem, in Philadelphia. She describes what she's observing, the psychological impact of systematic surveillance on communities, the stress of constant observation, the trauma of perpetual documentation, the damage of living under systems designed to monitor everything. Her presentation is clinical, professional, careful, but her message is clear. Surveillance creates psychological harm. Systematic observation causes systematic damage. The cost is real, measurable, severe. The response is dismissive. Other doctors question her findings. Is this really surveillance damage? Or just individual anxiety disorders? Isn't she politicizing psychology? Shouldn't she focus on individual treatment rather than systemic critique? The rejection is polite, professional, but absolute. The medical establishment is not interested in acknowledging that government surveillance causes psychological harm. Dr. Davis returns to Harlem, continues treating patients, continues documenting symptoms, continues observing damage, but alone. Without support, without validation, without institutional acknowledgement. January 1938. The psychological costs accumulate. People stop trusting each other, stop sharing information, stop collaborating, not because they want isolation, because trust has become dangerous, because sharing creates vulnerability, because collaboration requires exposure. The surveillance has poisoned social bonds, made relationships suspicious, made cooperation risky. Communities fragment not because people stop caring about each other, but because caring creates liability. Connection creates danger. Trust creates vulnerability. One church congregation splits, not over theology, over suspicion. Some members suspect others of informing, can't prove it, can't identify who, but the suspicion is enough. The suspicion creates factions, creates accusations, creates division. The church that survived segregation, survived depression, survived discrimination, fragments under surveillance, not because surveillance destroyed it directly, because suspicion destroyed it, because the fear of infiltration accomplished what infiltration might not. February 1938. Organizations develop internal security measures, questioning new members, limiting information access, compartmentalizing knowledge, security theater, security reality, security obsession. The measures are necessary. Infiltration is real. Informants exist. Protection is rational. But the measures also damage. They reduce openness, reduce democracy, reduce participation. Organizations become more secure, but also more closed, more protected, but also more isolated, more defended, but also more limited. One organization implements strict security protocols. New members face extensive vetting, long observation periods, limited participation until proven trustworthy. The protocols work. No infiltration detected, but participation drops. People don't want to join organizations that treat them like suspects. Don't want to be investigated to volunteer. Don't want surveillance from the organization meant to resist surveillance from authorities. The security succeeds, but the organization shrinks. Protected, but smaller. Secure, but weaker. Defended, but diminished. March 1938. Self-censorship becomes automatic. People stop saying certain things. Stop expressing certain ideas. Stop proposing certain actions. Not because anyone tells them to, because they've internalized what's acceptable, what's safe, what won't attract attention. The censorship is self-imposed, self-enforced, self-sustained. Surveillance doesn't need to actively suppress speech when people suppress themselves. Doesn't need to ban ideas when people stop expressing them. Doesn't need to prohibit actions when people stop proposing them. One teacher stops teaching certain history of resistance, history of organizing, history of political movements. Not because it's banned, because she fears consequences. Fears being noticed, fears being filed, fears being classified as concerning. The censorship is preventive, preemptive, precautionary. She's responding to possible future surveillance by limiting present speech. The surveillance doesn't need to be actual to be effective. The possibility is sufficient. The fear works as well as the fact. April 1938. Financial stress compounds. Organizations spending money on security instead of programs. On legal fees instead of organizing. On compliance instead of growth. Money that should build power is spent managing surveillance. Budgets consumed by defense. Resources diverted to survival. Every dollar spent on lawyers is a dollar not spent on education. Every hour spent on compliance is an hour not spent on organizing. The financial cost is direct, measurable, devastating. One organization's annual budget shows the reality. 1933, 60% programming, 40% administration. 1938, 30% programming, 70% administration. The programming money goes to community service, to organizing, to achieving mission. The administration money goes to legal fees, to compliance, to security, to managing surveillance. The organization still exists, still functions, but it's spending most of its resources not on what it's supposed to do, but on being allowed to exist while doing it. May 1938. Leadership exhaustion becomes critical. Leaders are working twice as hard for half the results. Organizing plus managing surveillance. Building plus defending. Creating plus protecting. The workload is unsustainable. The stress is overwhelming. The burnout is inevitable. Leaders quit not because they stop believing, but because they can't continue. Human capacity has limits. The surveillance has found those limits, has exceeded them, has broken people not through direct attack, but through accumulated burden. A. Philip Randolph, still organizing, still fighting, writes privately to a friend, "I am tired. Not physically, though I am that too. Tired in ways I cannot fully describe. Tired of being watched. Tired of being careful. Tired of assuming every room might have informants. Tired of parsing every sentence. Tired of managing surveillance while also trying to organize. Tired of fighting battles on multiple fronts simultaneously. Tired of explaining to younger organizers why we must be so cautious. Tired of seeing good people exhausted and broken. Just tired." He doesn't publish this, doesn't share it publicly, keeps fighting publicly, keeps organizing publicly, keeps leading publicly. But privately, he's exhausted. The surveillance has accomplished something arrests couldn't. It's worn down someone who seemed unwearable, not destroyed him, just tired him, made everything harder, made success more difficult, made continuation more costly, The surveillance doesn't need to break people completely, just needs to exhaust them enough, burden them enough, cost them enough that they slow down, do less, achieve less. That's sufficient victory. June 1938. Community relationships strain. Families divided over organizing. Spouses disagreeing about whether continuing is worth the cost. Parents protecting children by limiting their own activism. Relationships sacrificed to safety. Love expressed through caution. Care demonstrated through withdrawal. The surveillance damages not just organizations, but families. Not just movements, but relationships. Not just politics, but intimacy. One family divides. The father wants to keep organizing. The mother wants him to stop. Not because she disagrees with goals, because she sees the cost, sees the stress, sees the risk, sees the exhaustion, sees the danger. She's not wrong. The risk is real. The cost is high. The danger is present. But he can't stop, won't stop, feels obligated to continue. The disagreement becomes conflict. The conflict becomes crisis. The family survives but damaged, strained, changed. The surveillance destroys more than organizations. It destroys the relationships that sustain the people who build organizations. July 1938. Hope diminishes, not disappeared, not eliminated, but reduced. Harder to maintain, harder to sustain, harder to share. When every effort is monitored, when every success is documented, when every gain is noted and countered, hope becomes difficult. What's the point of organizing if organizing is watched? What's the purpose of building if building is documented? What's the value of resistance if resistance is filed and managed and eventually disrupted? The questions are corrosive, destructive, demoralizing. One young organizer quits, not because she's forced to, because she can't see the point. She's been organizing for 3 years, seen every initiative documented, every action countered, every success temporary, every gain reversed. She's not wrong in her observations. That's what's been happening. The surveillance has been effective. The disruption has been real. The management has been comprehensive. She can't see path to victory, can't see strategy that works, can't see hope for success. So she stops. Not defeated dramatically, just discouraged gradually, worn down incrementally, exhausted completely. August 1938. Cultural damage accumulates. Harlem used to celebrate organizing, used to honor activists, used to value political engagement. But now organizing is dangerous. Activism is risky. Political engagement is costly. The culture shifts, begins valuing safety over courage, caution over action, invisibility over visibility. Not completely, not uniformly, but noticeably, measurably, significantly. The culture that produced the Harlem Renaissance, that created new art forms, that built institutions, that organized movements, begins valuing survival over resistance. The shift is subtle, gradual, but real. September 1938. The cumulative cost is staggering. Psychological damage, organizational fragmentation, financial burden, leadership exhaustion, relationship strain, hope reduction, cultural shift. Every element measurable, every cost documentable, every impact observable. The surveillance hasn't destroyed Harlem, hasn't eliminated organizing, hasn't stopped resistance, but it's damaged everything, made everything harder, made everything costlier, made everything less organizing, less coordination, less mobilization, less power, less hope, less community, less future. October 1938. Dr. Davis writes a report, never published, too dangerous, but written, documented, for herself, for history, for record. She documents the psychological cost of systematic surveillance on observed communities, the trauma of constant monitoring, the damage of perpetual documentation, the harm of living under systems designed to watch everything. Her report is thorough, clinical, devastating. It concludes simply, surveillance at this intensity causes measurable psychological harm. The damage is real, severe, and cumulative. Communities cannot sustain health under constant observation. The cost is not just political, it's human. Her report stays in her files. Nobody reads it. Nobody references it. Nobody acts on it. But it exists. Evidence, documentation, proof that surveillance doesn't just control behavior. It damages people, harms communities, destroys health. The proof exists even though nobody acknowledges it. The damage continues even though nobody addresses it. The cost accumulates even though nobody pays attention to it. November 1938. The cost of constant observation is total, not total destruction. Total cost. Everything costs more. Everything is harder. Everything requires more. More energy, more resources, more sacrifice, more courage, more commitment, more endurance. Everything. The surveillance has made Harlem pay for continuing to exist, pay for trying to organize, pay for attempting to resist, pay for seeking to build power. The cost is extracted constantly, incrementally, inexorably, until communities are diminished not because they're destroyed, but because they're exhausted. Not because they're defeated, but because they're worn down. Not because they stop completely, but because they do less, achieve less, build less, become less. Control reshapes behavior. A photograph. Harlem, 1925. 135th Street, crowded, vibrant, busy. People everywhere. Businesses thriving. Organizations visible. Energy palpable. Another photograph. Same location. 1940. Quieter. Less crowded. Less visible energy. Buildings still there. People still present. But something changed. Something diminished. Something lost. The question: what happened between these photographs? Decline? Transformation? Containment? The answer is complicated. All three. None completely. Each partially. Harlem in 1940 is not destroyed, but it's different. Changed. Reduced. Not eliminated, but contained. Not crushed, but managed. Not defeated, but controlled. The surveillance achieved its goal not by destroying Harlem, but by limiting it. Not by eliminating organization, but by making organization harder. Not by stopping resistance, but by containing resistance to acceptable levels. Containment, not conquest. The organizational landscape tells the story. 1925. 117 active political and social organizations in Harlem. 1940. 63. Not zero, but almost half. Some organizations closed from financial pressure. Some fragmented from internal suspicion. Some dissolved from leadership exhaustion. Some merged with others for survival. Some just stopped functioning. The network that existed in 1925, the dense web of organizations, the interconnected system, is gone. Organizations still exist, but fewer, smaller, less connected, less effective, contained. The leadership data is equally revealing. 1925, the NYPD had watch lists with 43 priority level 1 targets. People considered most dangerous, most influential, most concerning. Of those 43, by 1940, 12 have left Harlem. 9 have stopped political activity. 7 are dead. 8 are in prison, mostly for non-political crimes discovered during surveillance. 7 are still active, but diminished, operating at reduced capacity. That's 43 people, the most effective leaders, the most dangerous organizers, the most concerning activists. Removed, retired, reduced, or eliminated. Not all through direct action, but all neutralized, all contained. Marcus Garvey was deported in 1927, not for political activity, for mail fraud. The crime was real. The prosecution was selective. The timing was not coincidental. A. Philip Randolph continues organizing in 1940, still active, still influential, but operating under constant surveillance. Every action documented, every initiative countered, Every success temporary. He's not destroyed, but he's managed, contained, controlled. The economic picture is mixed. Some black businesses failed under regulatory pressure. Others adapted and survived. The Harlem economy in 1940 is smaller than 1930, but still functional, still generating wealth, still providing employment, but less independent, more regulated, more supervised, more integrated into systems that enable observation. Black economic power still exists, but it exists under conditions that enable control. Money still flows, but the flows are documented, monitored, managed. The policy game still operates in 1940, never eliminated, just transformed. Some operations taken over by white organized crime. Others continue under black operators, but with increased police tolerance arrangements, meaning cooperation, meaning information sharing, meaning using criminal activity as leverage for political control. The policy game generates millions in 1940, just like 1930. But the relationship between operators and authorities has changed. Less confrontation, more cooperation, less independence, more management, containment, not elimination. The press survives. The Amsterdam News still publishes in 1940. The New York Age continues. Other newspapers come and go. The black press exists, but it's cautious, careful, self-censored, still covers injustice, still advocates for rights, still serves community, but within limits, within boundaries, within acceptable parameters. The press hasn't been eliminated, it's been managed. Press freedom exists. But press freedom under surveillance produces different journalism than press freedom without surveillance. Contained speech, not free speech. The churches remain, still serving, still organizing, still advocating, but differently. Some stopped hosting political meetings. Others continue, but carefully. Many shifted to exclusively religious activities. The religious institutions that provided organizing infrastructure in 1925 still exist in 1940. But many have withdrawn from political organizing. Not because forced to, because it became too costly, too risky, too difficult, self-limiting rather than suppressed, contained through creating conditions that encourage withdrawal rather than requiring it. So was this decline? Partly. Fewer organizations, fewer leaders, less organizing, less mobilization, less power. By most measures, decline, but not collapse, not destruction, not elimination. Harlem in 1940 still has organizations, still has leaders, still has resistance, still has community power. Diminished, but not destroyed. Reduced, but not eliminated. Contained, but not crushed. Was this transformation? Also partly. Harlem adapted, changed methods, developed new approaches, created alternative forms. The organizing in 1940 looks different than 1925. More invisible, more informal, more careful, but still present, still functional. The transformation is real, but it's not positive transformation. It's adaptive transformation. Transformation forced by necessity. Transformation shaped by surveillance. Transformation that preserves survival but reduces capacity. Transformation as containment. Or was this containment? Primarily, the surveillance system's goal was never destruction, was management, was control, was containing Harlem's organizational capacity to levels authorities considered acceptable. And by 1940, that's accomplished. Harlem still organizes, but not at levels that threaten, still resists, but not at scales that disrupt, still builds power, but not at intensities that challenge. Everything still exists, but everything is reduced to managed levels, contained. The containment is sophisticated, not absolute suppression, not total control, not complete elimination, but systematic limitation. Harlem can organize within limits, can resist within boundaries, can build power within parameters. The limits aren't stated, the boundaries aren't published, the parameters aren't official, but they exist. Maintained through surveillance, enforced through pressure, sustained through management. Cross them, and pressure increases. Stay within them, and tolerance continues. The system is complete. Was Harlem defeated? No. Harlem survives, continues, persists. Organizations still function. Leaders still lead. Communities still organize. Resistance continues. That's not defeat. That's survival. That's resilience. That's endurance. Harlem was not defeated by the surveillance system because Harlem still exists, still functions, still organizes, still resists, still builds. But was Harlem victorious? Also no. The goals Harlem organized for in 1925, full equality, political power, economic independence, those aren't achieved by 1940. Not because of lack of effort, not because of insufficient organizing, but because the organizing was systematically contained. The surveillance prevented the level of organization necessary for achieving transformative goals. Prevented coordination at scale needed for fundamental change. Prevented mobilization at intensity required for political victory. Harlem organized, but organized under conditions designed to prevent organization from achieving its goals. So the answer is neither defeat nor victory. It's containment. Harlem wasn't destroyed. It was managed. Wasn't eliminated. It was controlled. Wasn't defeated. It was contained to levels authorities considered acceptable. The surveillance achieved its purpose, not by eliminating Harlem's resistance, by limiting it, not by destroying organization, by reducing it, not by stopping resistance, by managing it. Containment as permanent condition rather than temporary situation. The institutional perspective is clear. The surveillance system considers itself successful. The files document the success. Organizations reduced. Leaders neutralized. Mobilization limited. Resistance contained. Goals achieved. Methods validated. System sustained. From the surveillance perspective, complete victory. From the institutional view, total success. The system did what it was designed to do. Contained black political organization in Harlem to manageable levels. Mission accomplished. But the community perspective is different. Harlem endured, survived, persisted, despite surveillance, despite pressure, despite containment. The community wasn't destroyed, wasn't eliminated, wasn't broken. Organizations still exist. Leaders still lead. Resistance continues. From the community perspective, survival is victory. Endurance is success. Continuation is achievement. The community did what it needed to do. Survived systematic attempt at control. Maintained capacity despite surveillance. Preserved resistance despite pressure. Mission also accomplished. Both perspectives are valid. Both truths exist. The system succeeded in containing. The community succeeded in surviving. The institutions achieved control. The community maintained resistance. Both things are true simultaneously. Both victories are real. Both claims are legitimate. This is not contradiction. This is complexity. This is reality of asymmetric power. The powerful achieve containment. The less powerful achieve survival. Both are real accomplishments. Both are significant achievements. Both matter. The long-term consequences are still unfolding in 1940. Still developing. Still unclear. The surveillance system developed in Harlem, the methods refined, the approaches perfected, are being exported, used elsewhere, implemented in other cities, applied to other communities, other movements. The infrastructure is scalable. The methodology is replicable. The justification is transferable. What was tested in Harlem is being deployed nationally. The consequences extend far beyond Harlem, far beyond 1940, far beyond anyone's ability to predict. The organizational damage is multi-generational. Young people growing up with surveillance as normal, with invisibility as necessary, with caution as mandatory. They're learning organizational methods shaped by surveillance, learning resistance practices formed by control, learning leadership styles adapted to observation. The methods work, enable survival, enable continuation, but they're not the methods communities would choose absent surveillance. They're not the approaches movements would develop without pressure. They're adapted methods, survival methods, defensive methods, and they're being learned as normal, as standard, as only option. The damage is being transmitted, inherited, continued. The psychological cost is permanent. Communities don't recover from decades of systematic surveillance. Don't heal from years of constant pressure. Don't forget generations of containment. The damage persists. The trauma continues. The cost accumulates. Even if surveillance stopped tomorrow, the effects would remain. The distrust would persist. The caution would continue. The self-censorship would remain. Trauma creates adaptations that outlast the trauma. Surveillance creates behaviors that persist after surveillance. The psychological cost is permanent, even when the surveillance is temporary, but the resistance is also permanent. Communities that survive surveillance develop resistance cultures, create endurance practices, build survival strategies. These persist too. Get transmitted, get inherited, get continued. The same way trauma is transmitted, resistance is transmitted. The same way damage is inherited, resilience is inherited. The same way surveillance shapes communities negatively, surviving surveillance shapes communities positively. Harlem in 1940 has suffered enormous damage, but has also developed enormous resilience. Both are real. Both matter. Both persist. So the question, decline, transformation, or containment, has no single answer. All three. Decline in organizational capacity. Transformation in organizational methods. Containment as overall result. Harlem is diminished but not destroyed. Changed but not eliminated. Contained but not defeated. The surveillance achieved its goals. The community achieved its survival. Both truths exist. Both matter. Both continue. The final assessment requires acknowledging complexity. This is not simple story of oppression and resistance, not simple narrative of control and freedom, not simple history of defeat or victory. It's complex reality of systematic surveillance meeting organized resistance, of institutional power meeting community resilience, of control mechanisms meeting survival strategies. Complex reality where both sides achieve something, where both sides lose something, where neither wins completely, where neither loses completely, where the result is not resolution but continuation, not ending but transformation, not conclusion but perpetuation. Control did not erase memory. The filing cabinets in room 317, police headquarters, June 1942, still there, still full, still maintained. 12 cabinets now, each packed with folders, each folder packed with pages, each page containing names, addresses, organizations, networks, observations. A decade and a half of systematic surveillance, documented, archived, preserved, and now being copied, shared, distributed, used as training materials. Federal Bureau of Investigation Training Academy, Quantico. September 1942. New agents receiving instruction. Subject, urban surveillance methods. The instructor uses Harlem as case study, explains the systems, the watch lists, the informant networks, the economic pressure, the regulatory coordination, the media management, the bureaucratic disruption. Everything perfected in Harlem. Everything now being taught. Everything being prepared for deployment elsewhere. The methods are being standardized. The approach is being systematized. The surveillance is being institutionalized. The legacy is methodology. Harlem was laboratory. The surveillance system tested there, refined there, perfected there. Now the methods are being exported. Los Angeles, Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., every city with significant black political organization, every location with growing civil rights activity, every place where communities are organizing. The Harlem model is being implemented, adapted to local conditions, but following same basic approach. Watch, document, infiltrate, pressure, disrupt, contain. The methodology is portable. The system is scalable. The surveillance is exportable. The watch list system becomes standard. Every field office maintains lists. Every city has classifications. Every location has priority targets. The system developed in Harlem in 1923, the 4-tier classification, the priority levels, the observation protocols, becomes standard FBI practice by 1943, replicated nationally, implemented systematically, used everywhere. The innovation becomes institution. The experiment becomes procedure. The Harlem method becomes federal policy. The informant recruitment techniques become standardized. The mixture of paid and coerced informants. The combination of financial incentive and legal leverage. The methods of maintaining informants long term. Everything learned through trial and error in Harlem becomes training material, becomes best practice, becomes institutional knowledge. The FBI teaches agents how to recruit like NYPD recruited in Harlem, how to maintain like NYPD maintained, how to use informants like NYPD used them. The methodology transfers completely. The economic surveillance approach becomes standard, coordinating with IRS, with regulatory agencies, with licensing authorities, using financial pressure, using regulatory enforcement, using bureaucratic obstacles. Everything tested in Harlem becomes standard federal practice, not officially documented as surveillance, documented as enforcement, as compliance, as administration, but used as control, as pressure, as containment. The approach is elegant, legal, effective, sustainable, and completely portable. The media management strategies transfer: how to pressure newspapers without censorship, how to use advertising pressure, how to delay distribution, how to audit publishers, how to create financial burden, how to generate self-censorship. The methods work, proven in Harlem, deployable elsewhere. By 1945, black newspapers in multiple cities face similar pressure, similar patterns, similar containment, not coordinated from single source, but using shared methodology, learned from Harlem, replicated nationally. The pattern spreads. But here's what makes the legacy profound. The surveillance doesn't end, doesn't stop after containing Harlem, continues, evolves, expands. The system built to control black political organization in Harlem becomes system for controlling political dissent generally. The methods developed for containing black resistance become methods for containing any resistance. The infrastructure created for managing Harlem becomes infrastructure for managing populations broadly. The legacy extends beyond original purpose, beyond original targets, beyond original scope. The files demonstrate this. By 1950, the FBI files include not just black activists, but labor organizers, socialist organizations, immigrant communities, student movements, any group advocating for significant social change, any organization challenging existing power structures, any movement seeking transformation. The surveillance expands, the targets multiply, the system grows, built for Harlem, refined for black communities, applied to everyone. The legacy is comprehensive, total, permanent. The psychological methodology transfers, the understanding that surveillance creates self-censorship, that observation changes behavior, that documentation generates caution, that filing produces fear. The insight gained through systematic observation of Harlem's response to surveillance becomes institutional knowledge, becomes operational principle. The system learns that visible surveillance deters but invisible surveillance controls, learns that announced monitoring prevents but secret observation manipulates, learns that known files restrict but unknown files dominate. The psychological sophistication increases, the understanding deepens, the control improves, the legal framework becomes permanent. The methods developed in Harlem, the coordination between agencies, the use of regulatory enforcement, the deployment of administrative obstacles, all legal, all within constitutional bounds, all sustainable indefinitely. The innovation was discovering that you don't need to ban political activity to control it, don't need to arrest organizers to neutralize them, don't need to suppress speech to limit it, just need systematic observation, strategic pressure, bureaucratic burden, legal methods, constitutional practices, sustainable approaches. The legal framework enables permanent surveillance, ongoing control, indefinite containment. But the legacy also includes resistance methodology. Harlem didn't just teach authorities how to surveil, taught communities how to survive surveillance. The adaptations Harlem developed, the invisible organizing, the cultural camouflage, the network structures, these become resistance knowledge. Get shared, get taught, get replicated. Other communities learn from Harlem's experience, learn what works, what doesn't, what survives, what fails. The resistance methodology also transfers, also spreads, also becomes legacy. The cultural impact is permanent. Harlem in the 1920s created cultural innovation, jazz, literature, art, dance. That culture, built under surveillance, shaped by pressure, formed by resistance, becomes American culture, becomes global culture. The innovation survives, the creativity persists, the cultural contribution outlasts the surveillance that shaped it. The paradox is complete. Surveillance intended to control helped create culture that influenced world. The containment produced the opposite of containment. The control generated uncontrollable influence. The legacy is contradictory, simultaneously oppressive and liberating, simultaneously limiting and influential, simultaneously containing and expanding. By 1960, the surveillance system is fully institutionalized. COINTELPRO makes explicit what was implicit, makes official what was informal, makes programmatic what was experimental. The methods tested in Harlem become official FBI program. The surveillance becomes acknowledged. The disruption becomes policy. The containment becomes directive. The legacy is complete. What began as city surveillance in 1923 becomes federal program by 1956. What started as Harlem experiment becomes national policy. The legacy is total, comprehensive, permanent. But measuring the legacy requires acknowledging what can't be measured. What organizing would have happened without surveillance? What movements would have succeeded without containment? What changes would have occurred without systematic disruption? The counterfactual is unknowable. The alternative history is invisible. The what might have been is lost. The legacy includes not just what happened, but what didn't. Not just what surveillance achieved, but what surveillance prevented. Not just visible effects, but invisible absences. The full legacy is immeasurable because it includes possibilities eliminated before they could exist. The communities targeted know the cost, know the damage, know the loss. The knowledge passes through generations, through families, through stories, through experience. The communities remember what institutions forget. Remember what official histories omit. Remember what files don't capture. The lived experience of surveillance. The human cost of containment. The personal impact of systematic observation. The memory persists. The knowledge continues. The legacy lives in communities, even when erased from records. The surveillance files are eventually destroyed, officially. Many files from the 1920s and 1930s are purged, officially for space, officially for records management, officially for administrative efficiency. But the destruction also erases evidence, eliminates documentation, removes proof. The surveillance happened, the files existed, the system functioned, but the physical evidence is reduced, limited, partial. The legacy becomes harder to prove, harder to document, harder to demonstrate. The institutional memory is deliberately obscured, but the impact remains. In organizational cultures shaped by surveillance awareness, in resistance practices formed by containment experience, in community memories transmitted across generations, in political strategies adapted to observation, in cultural expressions shaped by pressure, in survival mechanisms developed under control. The legacy persists in ways that don't require files to prove, in ways that exist in lived experience, in ways that continue in practice, in ways that matter more than documentation. The legacy is real even when records are destroyed, is powerful even when evidence is eliminated, is permanent even when officially erased. What does the legacy mean? Multiple things, simultaneously. It means sophisticated control mechanisms developed through systematic experimentation on Black communities. It means resistance strategies refined through surviving systematic oppression. It means cultural innovation produced under pressure. It means community resilience developed through adversity. It means governmental power deployed comprehensively. It means survival achieved despite overwhelming force. It means damage inflicted systematically. It means endurance maintained persistently. All these meanings exist. All are valid. All are true. All are legacy. The legacy is not simple, not single, not unitary. It's complex, multiple, contradictory. The surveillance system succeeded in containing. The communities survived despite containment. The methods became institutionalized. The resistance became culturalized. The damage was severe. The resilience was remarkable. The cost was enormous. The continuation was inspiring. The legacy includes all of it, all the complexity, all the contradiction, all the truth, everything that happened, everything that resulted, everything that continues. And in 2025, researchers studying surveillance systems examine the Harlem case, not as historical curiosity, as foundational example, as methodology source, as precedent. The methods developed there, the approaches refined there, the systems perfected there, are still being studied, still being analyzed, still being understood as innovations that shaped how governments surveil populations, how institutions control communities, how power manages resistance. The legacy is not just historical, it's contemporary. The surveillance developed in Harlem in 1923 influenced surveillance systems globally for decades, influenced them still. The legacy is living, active, ongoing. The files may be destroyed, the actors may be dead, the original system may be obsolete, but the legacy continues, in methods still used, in approaches still deployed, in understanding still applied, in systems still operating, in communities still affected, in resistance still necessary, in survival still required, in memory still preserved, in impact still felt. The legacy of Harlem surveillance is permanent because it's not just past, it's present, not just historical, it's structural. Not just what happened, it's what continues to happen because of what happened. This is the final truth. The surveillance of Harlem between 1923 and 1940 was not isolated incident, was systematic development of surveillance methodology that shaped governmental approach to political dissent for generations, was refinement of control mechanisms that became standard practice, was experimentation on Black communities that produced methods applied broadly, was innovation in population management that influenced institutions permanently, was specific historical event with general historical consequences, was Harlem's experience with implications far beyond Harlem, was limited time period with unlimited temporal effects. The legacy is this: Harlem taught authorities how to watch, how to document, how to infiltrate, how to pressure, how to disrupt, how to contain. Everything learned systematically, everything refined carefully, everything preserved permanently, everything applied broadly, everything institutionalized completely. That's the legacy. Comprehensive methodology of surveillance, total system of control, complete infrastructure of containment, developed in Harlem, exported everywhere, continuing indefinitely. But also this: Harlem taught communities how to survive, how to adapt, how to endure, how to resist invisibly, how to organize differently, how to continue despite everything. Everything learned painfully, everything developed necessarily, everything transmitted carefully, everything maintained persistently. That's also the legacy. Comprehensive methodology of survival, total culture of resistance, complete commitment to continuation, developed in Harlem, shared widely, continuing forever. Both legacies exist, both matter, Both continue. Both shape present. Both influence future. Both are permanent. The surveillance legacy, the survival legacy, the control legacy, the resistance legacy, the oppression legacy, the resilience legacy, all real, all powerful, all permanent. All consequences of systematic surveillance meeting determined resistance, of institutional power confronting community strength, of control mechanisms encountering survival strategies. The legacy is everything that resulted, everything that continues, everything that remains. And in the end, this remains. The files documented everything except what mattered most. They documented names, but not dignity. Documented activities, but not motivations. Documented organizations, but not community. Documented resistance, but not resilience. Documented everything observable, but nothing essential. They created complete record of surveillance, but incomplete understanding of what was surveilled. Created total documentation of control, but partial comprehension of what was controlled. The files are comprehensive, but they're also insufficient. They capture the system, but miss the soul. Record the observation, but lose the essence. Document the surveillance, but cannot contain what it was watching. Cannot contain the humanity. Cannot contain the determination. Cannot contain the spirit that survived everything the surveillance deployed. That's the final legacy. The surveillance was total. The documentation was comprehensive. The control was systematic. But the human spirit it attempted to contain remained uncontained. The community it tried to manage remained unmanaged. The resistance it tried to eliminate remained resistant. Not because the surveillance failed, because what it was surveilling was stronger than surveillance, more resilient than control, more enduring than containment. That's the ultimate legacy. Not just what surveillance achieved, what survived surveillance, what continued despite surveillance, what remains long after surveillance ends. The past informs the present. The methods remain. The resistance continues. The legacy persists. In every surveillance system that watches communities. In every community that survives being watched. In every documentation of control that meets determination to resist. In every file that captures information but misses meaning. In every observation that records activity but cannot contain spirit. The legacy is permanent, complete, comprehensive, and ultimately insufficient. Because history is not just what was done to people. It's what people did despite what was done to them. That's the legacy. Both sides, both truths, both realities, forever.